Good evening, everybody. Sorry we're a few minutes late. I'd like to have a motion to reopen the public board meeting. Moved by Commissioner Berkeley, second by Commissioner Chinia. All in favor? Ronald, are you good? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Motion passes 9-0 with one absent. Meeting is officially open. I'd like to call to order and recognize the JROTC from New Era Academy. Can everybody please stand? Boy, that was brave that he was going to sing the national anthem. Yeah, no, he did have a nice voice. I'd like to again thank the JROTC from New Era New Era Academy, Cadet Denisha Hill, Cadet Zadi Cardona, Cadet Corporal Stephanie, Cadet Captain Fernando Woodson, Cadet Lieutenant Nathaniel Parker, and Cadet Private First Class Abden Lopez. Thanks again. Before I ask Commissioner Chinia to talk to us about two members of our community that have passed, I want to just take a moment and acknowledge the passing of Speaker Mike Bush from the State House of Delegates. We talk in here all the time about what we need to do in Annapolis and how much we have to fight for in Annapolis, and everybody's got to go to Annapolis. One thing was always clear in Annapolis, that Speaker Bush was a friend of Baltimore City, and Speaker Bush was a friend of Baltimore City Public Schools. So when we paused for a moment of silence for the members of our immediate community, please also hold Speaker Bush and his family in your hearts and prayers. It is a tremendous loss for them, and it is also a tremendous loss for the city and for the state. Thank you.
And now I'd like to take time to recognize the passing of one of our city school students and a former employee. Lamont Green was a 10th grade student at Academy for College and Career Exploration, ACE. Lamont had an infectious smile and was always a pleasure to be around. His energy and enthusiasm could light up a room. The entire ACE school community is saddened by his passing. He will be missed dearly. We hope his light always shines as bright as his smile. Ms. Evelyn Beasley served as the principal of Roland Park Elementary Middle School for nearly 2 decades. Mrs. Beasley was a graduate of Frederick Douglass High School and later Coppin State Teachers College and Johns Hopkins University. Mrs. Beasley began teaching in the city public schools in 1954. In 1969, she was named principal of Hazelwood Elementary School and charged with turning the school around. She did so well that in 1976, she was sent to Roland Park Elementary Middle School. Under her leadership, Roland Park became a major feeder to the city's magnet schools and was nationally recognized for its high academic standards. Mrs. Beasley retired from Roland Park in 1993 and went on to work for the State Department of Education, mentoring new principals. She will be greatly missed by an entire generation of teachers, students, and staff. And I just want to say, as one of those folks who was both a parent and a colleague, and she was one of my mentors, one thing that she taught everyone was the importance of really knowing what was happening within the schools. And after her retirement, Ms. Beasley was always sitting in this room for every board meeting. So will you please join me for a moment of silence as we remember three important people within our community. Thank you.
It's not often you can say that you recognize two legends at the same time. It's quite something. Motion to approve the minutes from the prior open session. Motion moved by Commissioner Hassan, second by Commissioner Richardson. All in favor? Commissioners Lynn, McFadden, Bondima, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley, Richardson. Motion passes 10-0. Motion to approve the prior closed session summary. Moved by Commissioner Berkeley, second by Commissioner Richardson. All in favor? Commissioners McFadden, Bondima, Hassan, are you good? Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley, Richardson. Motion passes 9-0. Only one committee has met since the last public board meeting, so I'd like to ask Commissioner Berkeley from a report from the Teaching and Learning Committee.
The Teaching and Learning Committee met on April 2nd, and we looked at data about mid-year performance data from the school system, which was encouraging and good and comprehensive. We also looked at a semi-annual special education update, also important and good. So it was a good meeting. Thank you.
The only thing I want to say as part of board chair comments is that I had the pleasure this morning of helping to clean the campus around Commodore John Rogers as part of a service day with 130 volunteers from Constellation from not only Baltimore City, the Baltimore region, but as far away as Delaware, and they had even 50 people in here from Chicago. They were in 9 schools today, schools that are participating as part of our schools that do a lot of greening and environmental projects, and they were planting gardens and building garden beds and cleaning campuses and planting trees and just pretty much anything that was asked of them. So just want to give a shout out to Constellation for all the help they were today and for just all the kids and adults that were present in those schools to have a really good spirit of cooperation to get a lot of things done around the schools. And there are no donations to report tonight. So with that, I will ask for a motion to approve the PEP agenda and the 2 appeals and hearings cases, case number 18-85A GR and case number 19-05A DW. Moved by Commissioner Richardson, second by Commissioner Berkeley. All in favor? Commissioners McFadden, Bondima, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley, and Richardson. Motion passes 9-0. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Santelises.
Thank you, Chair Kashani and the Board of Commissioners. Good evening, everybody. I just want to double check with Chief Grant Skinner. Is there a PEP this evening? Great, so I will invite Chief Grant Skinner to share this evening's PEP agenda.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Dr. Santelises. We have 2 appointments this evening, actually for the same position. First, Daniel Heller, currently Manager of College and Career Readiness, is appointed Interim Director for College Readiness effective April 10th through June 30th. And then Mavis Jackson, currently a teacher at Academy for College and Career Exploration, will be appointed Permanent Director of College Readiness effective July 1st. And Mavis is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Grant Skinner. This evening, as we all know, City Schools is fortunate to benefit from a richly diverse student population. I had the chance to attend our first annual International Family Night this past week, and it was just wonderful to see the richness and diversity of our families, of our students, and to see families representing, frankly, countries from across the globe all here within City Schools. And we have and will continue to welcome students and families from all over the world, like our country. Our school system really is made better, and this was something that I said last week as well. Our city is made better because of this diversity and the representation we have here in Baltimore City from people across the world. In Baltimore alone, Soccer Without Borders is also an international organization that combines soccer, education, and community to serve our newcomer boys and girls through after-school and summer programs with an emphasis on academic enrichment, social support, English language development, and family engagement. In Baltimore alone, since 2009, Soccer Without Borders has worked with students from 44 countries, speaking 22 languages, with very, very impressive results. In addition to soccer, students are supported academically with after-school and summer tutoring, English language integration, and help with college applications, all in an environment of welcome and inclusiveness. As a result, 100% of participating high school students graduated on time with their 4-year cohort. And 94% of high school graduates went on to enroll in 2- or 4-year colleges. Those are not data points to sniff at. Not only are they impressive in the collective number, but also in the individual young people's lives, who basically are the faces of those numbers. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Emily Sherman, the Director of Soccer Without Borders in Baltimore City, Maria Remore, our ESOL coordinator, somebody else who was working hard last week at the International Family Night, Matthew Warner, Educational Associate, and our city school students. And forgive me, I'm going to give the best shot at making sure I get your names right, but make sure you correct me if I'm wrong, okay? I'm going to do my best. We have Ascende Baile. Did I say that right? Yes. I did? Oh, yay for me. And Ascende is from Patterson High School. We also have with us Aya Al-Saheli. Say it again. Oh, gosh, it's so much more beautiful when you say it. From Vanguard Collegiate Middle School, and Hussein Abdullah. Very good. From Patterson High School. And I want to invite both the students and their coaches to speak about their experiences. Did I forget somebody? Is there somebody right here? Do we have a fourth student?
Hit your button.
Sorry, we had a late addition. This is Humed Noura, also from Vanguard Middle School.
Wonderful, Humed Noura. It's wonderful to have you as well. So I'm going to invite all of the students and their coaches to speak really about your experiences in Soccer Without Borders and really your work specifically here in Baltimore City. So I'd like to welcome you now. Come on up. And if you need more chairs, you can bring a chair with you. Okay? That's allowed. Don't let the rows intimidate you.
Okay, sorry. I won't speak long, but thank you so much for having us here. I am Emily Sherman. I have the pleasure of working with these students throughout the year. We have year-round programming for middle school and high school, and then during the summer, we welcome the youngest students from pre-K, entering kindergarten, all the way through 12th grade. We have our students work as youth workers who are serving to support the younger students throughout the summer. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and then if there's any questions, they'd be happy to answer them.
Hi, my name is Humed.
Where are you from?
Hi, my name is Humed. I'm from Eritrea. I speak Amharic, Afar, and English. I come to this country in 2016. I'm in Vanguard Collegiate Middle School. One thing that I like from SWB is they help us with our homework, and we ask any coach that we need help from. I think they are the best.
Can you tell us where you're from again? I didn't hear it.
I am from Eritrea.
Hey everyone, my name is Hussein Abdullah. My first language is Kurdish, my second language is Arabic, third language English. I'm trying to learn a little Spanish. And I'm from Syria, but my grandfather from Iraq, they're Kurdish. So I'm coming to United States 2016, November 2016. And secure the border, it's like, for me, it's like a mother, like hugging like her children's. Because like every day I see like 100 children's like playing together, the same language, but they all like speaking different language, but the one thing is they all speaking English. So everyone when come to United States, they not speaking not English, like they cannot communicate with the people, like they can do nothing. But when it comes to secure the border, they teach us like English, they make a friends, like for me, I miss like summer classes. I'm 19 years old now, so Mr. Warner like put me like a program summer to like learn, take like classes, like English and a lot of things. So I thanks for them.
Hi everybody, my name is Asende. I'm from Tanzania. My first day to come here was 2016, September 14, 2016. I was work with SWB. I was going there like students to help me, homework, language, so how to communicate to each other. So I work there, so now I am 19 years old, and I work with SWB like now it's 2 years and a half. So I need to say something with SWB. SWB helped me a lot of things. Because I was coming here, I did not speak any English. If any people ask me something, I stay quiet. I say, I don't know speak English. So right now I'm happy to say with you and to speak English. So this make me happy. And SWB helped me a lot of things, to go to visit college, to ask some question, and to help me homework. So this is make me happy because we play soccer with different people from different country. So they teach us to communicate to each other, so how we can do. So this make me so happy, and thank you to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Aya. I come from Iraq. I came here in 2015, and it was really hard for me because it was only me and my mom. And it was hard to adjust into like a new life, learning a whole new language, meeting new people from like different countries. And it was very difficult. I reached points where I wanted to like give up and just go back. But my mother like came and talked to me, and then I met SLB, and they helped me a lot. They told me not to give up. And there were points where I wanted to give up just because I was a girl. But they showed me that I was like powerful enough to stand against the whole world. And then I met people that stood next to me to make me stand against the world and be stronger. And I like to thank SW for making me who I am right now and who I will be in the future. So thank you so much.
May I add something?
Sure.
2017, I was given up to doesn't go to school because I was not speaking any English. So then when my coaches hear it, that I'm not going to school anymore, so my coaches came into my house and they told me, can you hear your voice, how you're speaking now, 3 languages? So you don't have to give up, you will be something in the future. So they like achieve my goal.
Oh, my.
So now I'm starting going to high school.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Hassan?
Thank you all for being here. Congratulations on your journey, and thank you for reaching back to pull others along with you. Just like to highlight the value of learning through the physical and the place that that can come to that crosses language, crosses customs, crosses cultures, crosses histories and oppression, and can really work to unite people. And I just hope that we can work to build movement experiences, whether they're through athletics, physical activity, or the arts, to help emancipate and build agency with all students. So thank you.
What struck me is you've all learned the English language you have good command of the English language because you didn't have any trouble speaking with us, and I think it sets you apart from most Americans because now you speak more languages than most of us could ever. Yeah. So you're way ahead of most of us. I'll speak personally. You're way ahead of me. So I appreciate the work that Soccer Without Borders does with the young people and in a society that is getting terrific at pulling people apart. It's wonderful that an activity like that can bring people together. So thank you to the young people and to the coaches and advisors. Thank you.
Thank you all again. This evening, we will also be presenting City Schools budget for the upcoming 2019-2020 school year. I wanted to take just a few minutes to just review the goals and priorities that guided us through the budget development process, also to highlight the work that I was proud to be able to report on. We had a cross-functional team of folks representing a variety of offices here, probably about 3 months ago now, giving us an update on where we were with the budget process. We are proud, and were then, to report, while we are not totally where we need to be, we did a much better job this year. We got feedback from families in getting out to more schools. We still have a ways to go in terms of communicating, but with regards to the board rightly pointing out, the need to get better at having an inclusive process and a process that across schools would make it easier for parents and families to engage. As we noted a few months ago, we have seen some movement in that area. And part of the driver of that is really the belief that budgeting is really a reflection of the priorities of the school district, the strategy of the school district, and really our ability to align those resources with those priorities. Now, as we all know, we do not yet have the adequate resources to meet all of our needs and achieve all of our goals. So this year, we required all schools to hold these school meetings to discuss the priorities, and I think, again, what I would say is the kind of yeoman's work done by school teams and school communities to say that even recognizing that we don't yet have all of the funding we need, what we saw were a number of school communities coming together and at least driving and having discussions about what the priorities were and aligning the resources to them. Now, as was the case last year. So too it is now that in addition to the district level forums, we're now at the place where really the overriding priority for this budget is funding the work aligned to the blueprint that helps us move as a school district to provide equitably excellent or equitable access to excellent education for every young person in Baltimore. Now, I will not sit before you today and say that we are there. I will not sit and say that we don't have a long way to go. But I do think we are further along in the processes that allow us to be able to communicate not only to the board, but to the public what those priorities were. I think as we look, and I would encourage the general public to look along with the board at the primary focus areas of literacy, leadership, and student wholeness. What you should see is the continued investment that we have intentionally made in each of these areas as we extend the blueprint further across districts. We started with a total of 60 intensive learning sites. We will be expanding out this year. And our commitment moving forward is that our budgets will continue to better reflect our progress and our challenges in achieving those goals over time. One of the things I will say now, and I will also repeat in shortened form when we actually get ready for the budget presentation, is that we have had a lot of activity this year in Annapolis as the legislature are really wrestled with the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission and the need to commit additional funding to education. One of the things that I think is a plus in that, and I want to give kudos again to our staff, in particular, Chief of Staff Perkins Cohen, Melissa Broom, Dewana Starrett, and others. But they, I would say, led most consistently around making sure that we were informed and in tune with what the legislation might yield for Baltimore City Public Schools. We're right now at about, I would say close to, if I went back to it, probably close to about a total of about close to $50 million. I think the piece that is important, God bless you, Commissioner Reed. No apologies necessary. But that I think is important for folks to understand is that the budget that you will receive tonight, while we know that we're in about the $50 million ballpark because of some of the provisions, and I guess the best way to say it, some of the mandates around how the money must be spent, we are still sifting through to see what the implications are for both central budget, where we admittedly still had holes of funding in terms of some priority areas, as well as any additional resources that would be going to school. So while we know generally what the amount is, I will say this again prior to the presentation when more people come as well. Just please keep in mind that with that number, we're still teasing out what the implications are for budgets, because there are a lot of, for lack of a better term, strings attached to how that money must be spent. It's not just an overall per pupil allotment. So we're sifting through that and want to, even just the day after the legislature officially signed off for the year, I want to thank the Baltimore City delegation for their work in advocating in a season where, frankly, there were times where it was difficult to advocate for the city. They held their commitment to making sure that Baltimore City Public Schools was in the mix. And I think because of their advocacy and work as well, we can be very thankful on that. I think the other piece that I will also say is with regards to, in terms of closing, we will be, I know we've had a number of questions that have come up. I think the board has rightly surfaced questions. I want to remind everyone in terms of the public that we will be giving an update on our school safety audit that we began months ago, that was triggered by a number of school-based challenges, frankly, and school-based and community, frankly, violence and the impact on schools. We actually saw that, the silver lining in all of that, as an opportunity to step back and to reassess where we were with regards to our school safety. And so, really what we are doing is going to be at that meeting, updating the public with regards to some of our initial findings, where some of our gaps and holes are, and where we will prioritize moving forward with regards to school safety. Folks should know that Baltimore City Schools recently received for fiscal year 2019 school safety grant as part of Maryland School Safety Grant Program. So we received close to $1 million. And what we will be doing, all principals were surveyed to identify schools with the most pressing security needs in everything from classroom doors in need of locks, cameras, and exterior doors. I will say now, one of the things that was true in terms of the results of that survey to principals, and is also true as we conducted a deeper audit of school safety, is that our needs in these areas across schools far exceed what our capital budget is every year. So I think it is important that the public knows what I've also shared with the board, and that is when you are talking about systemic underinvestment over a period of time, it is going to take time to be able to do things like, one, guarantee that every used classroom in every school, not just one person school, in every school has a lockable door. That is actually a significant financial investment based on the state of where we are right now with regard to workable door locks. So that, I would invite everyone to please tune in April 23rd for that board meeting, or attend, so that you can hear and actually provide some feedback and insight in terms of how we will use the funding in future grants. For this year, folks should know that we're going to be able to complete 26 projects, including 15 lockable classroom door projects and 11 security surveillance upgrades, and the total investment will be about $1.1 million in that endeavor this year. Let's see, and that is it. That concludes my remarks for this evening. I will just say yet again that I would encourage us. I attended the International Family Night with Chief High Cupboard, and I will just say, and it was true when the young people from Soccer Without Borders came, that when you walk through and you see the engagement and the commitment of our families, particularly our families that are newly arrived or not native to Baltimore City, and the vigor with which they engaged, the information tables that they engaged in learning in one another's cultures, was, I will tell you, like a cool drink of water in a very dry week. And it just was a testament to the power of our communities, the power of our families. I met family after family who shared wonderful stories about welcoming principals, teachers who attended to young people's needs, and over again, really just showed the promise of the work that we're doing in city schools. So with that, I conclude my remarks for the evening, and I turn it back over to Chair Kashani.
Thank you. I'd like to do an initial review of the consent agenda. When we come back after public comment, we'll review it again to see if there's any other items that you'd like to pull. So, let's see. Item 8.01, FY 2019 supplemental appropriation. Item 8.02, another supplemental appropriation. These are all related to the MSA and 21st Century Schools. Item 8.03, another supplemental appropriation from the MSA. Yes, this is just approving the movement from the 21st Century Schools budget into our budget to spend. Sure. Item 8.04, Policy IGE, Curriculum, second reader. We are going to pull item 8.05, Policy JBB, Sex Discrimination Students, second reader, so that we can have a presentation. We are also going to pull item 8.06, Policy BEBG, regarding the agenda. We have to make a separate motion for that. Item 8.07, Curriculum Approval, Science and Computer Science. Item 8.08, Portfolio Recommendations for Vanguard Collegiate Middle School. Item 8.09, Waiver Request, FKA, Edmondson Westside High School. Item 8.10, Waiver Request for KIPP Harmony Academy. Two items on the procurement agenda, both of which have been reviewed at the Teaching and Learning Committee already. One, item 10.01 for Goucher College. And item 10.02, Public Consulting Group. Okay, when we come back after public comment, we will see if there's any other items to pull, but at this point, we will vote on everything except item 8.05 and 8.06, which will have a presentation. And we'll have to conduct two votes because there's some items that Joshua can vote on and there's others that he can't, so we'll split those out as well. Okay, good. With that, we will turn to,
Yeah, just one note, since it's not 6 o'clock yet, Enrollment Task Force is going to present.
I was going to do the specially recognized groups first.
Oh,
So I'd like to, and then we'll see where we, and then we'll see where we stand. Yeah, I was going to ask if you wanted to do that or the last one, but let's see where we stand. Is that okay? We have a couple of groups from our specially recognized groups tonight. We'll start with Sheila Billups from CCAC.
Good evening, everyone. I come to talk about our last night's meeting. It was a CCAT policy night. I had Tracy L. Durant there, Daniel Heller, and Miss Angela Everest wasn't present, but someone from her department came, and that was Miss Lindsay Anderson. It was a terrific, informative night of all these policies that they gave us so much information. They listened to us. They was well received. Respectfully, we had recommendations to go back to their committees and talk about. So I'm so excited that they came last night and they presented to us on a wonderful, 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 wonderful policies about what's going to happen in Baltimore City schools. Also, I would like to say that CCAT will be out this week into the community. We have two transition fairs we'll be going to. One is at Mergethal and the other one is at Claremont. And also, yours truly will be with the BTU on the task force. Thank you.
Thanks as always, Sheila. Next are our friends from the BTU. I can see John. I think, John, you have a couple colleagues with you tonight?
Yes, I do.
I have Kenya Campbell, James Blanchard, and Bernard Barber.
Right.
Is that still correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Good evening, Dr. Santalese, Commissioners, and Madam Chair, Ms. Cassiani. I'm John Casey, Field Representative with the Baltimore Teachers Union. We have some Executive Board members who can introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kenya Campbell, the Teacher Chair for the Baltimore Teachers Union.
James Blanchard, Treasurer.
Good evening, Bernard Barber, Member at Large.
And for Dr. Santalese, Mr. Blanchard is from Boston originally and another New England Patriots fan. So, although we still accept
I knew that there was a glow that was there.
Seriously, that's how you're going to start?
Yes. I said unfortunately. another New England Patriots fan. We tolerate him as much as we can. I want to say hi to my good friend, Chief of Staff, Ms. Cohen Perkins.
Very much. I really appreciate you always saying,
Yes, I don't
acknowledging me, and
if I forget it
always
one
love
time,
working with you.
I don't
Thank
want to feel
you.
you'd be left out. I want to talk about the LGBTQAI anti-discrimination policy. The BTU has a long history of fighting for the civil rights of our members and our students. Most recently, we fought to ensure that BCPSS health plan covered transgender surgical procedures. No one has the right to obstruct access to classrooms, facilities, or the overall education of an educator or a school based on the color of their skin, religious affiliation, or sexual orientation. The BTU is in support of the anti-discrimination policy that would be put in place to protect our LGBTQAI members and students. To piggyback off of what Madam Chair, Commissioner Cassiani said, the BTU is saddened by the passing of Speaker Michael Bush. His advocacy for education will not be forgotten because he understood the needs of educators in Baltimore City and throughout the state of Maryland. So that is a tragic loss for Annapolis and for the city of Baltimore. The 2019 session closed with some victories for education. Two important issues, the school calendar. Now that the General Assembly overrode Governor veto over when the school should begin, gives us jurisdiction over our school calendar. The BTU is looking forward to working with you on establishing pertinent dates on the school calendar. And to piggyback off of what Dr. Santalisa said earlier, the General Assembly also approved a 2-year plan to send $80 million for additional funding for public schools throughout the Kerwin Commission. The funds will help to fund pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds, as well as establish more community schools. So we thought that was very important, that bills that went into effect in Annapolis, and I know that the BTU, along with the school system, took buses down to support education funding for the students in the city, because when the students succeed, everybody in the system succeeds, teachers, administrators, commissioners. So we're working hand in hand, and we will continue to work hand in hand when it comes to education funding for Baltimore City.
And I do want to thank the BTU, and I was remiss earlier because you all really have been wonderful partners on that. And I want you to know that the cowbells are still the most popular thing I have brought home in a long time.
Wow.
So kudos
Yeah.
on the cowbells.
Yes, they were in display with the red hats and the cowbells that were just nonstop that night. So, but thank you for your time. I don't know if any of my executive board members have anything to say. Any questions?
Questions, comments? Except for you, you can't comment.
Yes, right, thank you. You have the floor to not give anybody the opportunity to
Never
speak.
mind that I'm a Steelers fan.
You what?
That's enough.
That's right. And that's wonderful because I'm originally from Pittsburgh, so I'm also a Steelers fan. So yes, I knew there was a connection somewhere.
I knew I liked you. I knew there was a reason why I liked you
That's
so much.
right. Yes. Wow.
Very cool.
We outnumber the other ones. So
I know.
don't worry.
Thanks a lot,
Thank
you
you for your
guys.
time.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
I'd now like to invite a friend from Associated Student Congress for Baltimore City, Angel Hargrave. Hargrove. I can't read my own handwriting. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Angel Hargrove. I am a junior at Vivian T. Thomas Medical Arts Academy, and I am the secretary of ASCBC. I am speaking to you today to report our Maryland Association of Student Congress Ocean City convention trip. Well, first I want to thank the board to financially support for ASCBC to send additional students to the Ocean City for the convention. Thank you very much. This will allow us to ensure that each student that wanted to send delegates could send 3 students on the trip. ASCBC had the 3 largest delegations in Maryland presence, and our students were very engaged as they went to the workshops and general assemblies. We had students from 18 different schools in the district attend in grades 6 through 12. Our students did a great job representing Baltimore City. They asked thoughtful questions of candidates running for office, did a great job in their workshop learning new skills, and contribute to series of projects. And attend as a role model for students. ASCBC was recognized for hosting a MASC executive board meeting, and everybody with MSAC was impressed at the continued development of SGA in Baltimore City. ASCBC is already hard at work with planning for next year. We have ASCBC elections for 2019 and 2020 school years upcoming on May 23rd at 4 p.m. Election package should be submitted by 5 p.m. on April the 27th. Next year, we are planning to continue to offer SGA memberships and support to every school and district. We are hoping to continue to double our memberships year after year and get more students involved in SGA leadership. We wanted to make sure that every young person in Baltimore City has a chance to have their voice heard and advocate for a positive future for our school system in the city. And as for our budget plan, we have sent it to Mr. Danny Heller in the Career and College Readiness, and we're waiting for feedback. And I want to say thank you for letting me present what I have for you today. And thank you.
Any questions? Angel, if you could hold just for a second.
I just have a quick comment.
Yes, ma'am.
You are a breath of fresh air. I really enjoy listening to you. You sound just like you are so happy to be involved in what the work that you're doing, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a great day.
And we have a question from Commissioner McFadden.
How is ASCBC becoming involved in MASC? Are we all looking to have students participate on the state level in the state level positions to represent us statewide?
Absolutely. When we went to the convention this year, well, a couple of months ago, they told every region and state said, well, if you want to get a chance to represent statewide, you are willing to, and you have to contact, I forgot the person who runs it, but you can contact her and you can run for a place in office.
I would also like to add that I haven't told ASCBC yet, but I will be running for state SMOB for the statewide statewide Board of Education. So that'll be coming up this year. So getting prepared for that. So hopefully there will be representation for Baltimore City on the statewide board.
You know, we always got you.
Terrific. Thanks. It's a little before 6, so in keeping with our practice of not starting public comment until 6, according to the setup of our meetings, we're going to bump up the Enrollment Task Force presentation. So after the Enrollment Task Force presentation, then we're going to go to public comment.
Sorry, I had to run here. No, I'm just kidding. My name is Joe Strake. I'm the board liaison. I work in the CEO's office. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Board Chair Kashani, Dr. Santelises, Vice Chair Chinia. All right, so just a brief reminder, I was here in June of this past year kind of talking about the recommendations of the Enrollment Task Force, so I'm back to talk about the work that's been done over the course of the last few months, I guess year almost. Time flies here. Hold for laughs, no laughs, keep going, okay. So the initial recommendations were provided by 3 work groups in customer service, enrollment and retention, and marketing. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about each of those as I move forward here. So the Enrollment Task Force at first was made up of nonprofit members, community members, businesses, and then we took those recommendations, met with different internal departments, and then Christy Lewis and I who works in the CEO's office as well, went out and met with community to get more recommendations. And these are the dates and locations of those recommendations. Specifically for Commissioner Bondima, we wanted to make sure Cherry Hill was represented. So we had a meeting at the beautiful new Arundel 21st century building. Absolutely fantastic, beautiful facility. And we're planning on doing more of those. Our last one was snowed out, unfortunately. So we're going to do some more later on in the spring. So during the course of these meetings, we heard a lot of recurring themes. These are some of them. So we heard almost universally that there was difficulty in understanding the choice process. Middle school choice, high school choice, there was just a lot of confusion about that. Also, equally as confusing, people were about enrolling in pre-K and kindergarten. And this kind of goes into the work that Dr. Durant is going to be doing. Is doing rather, and that's equity. So we heard a very common theme of unevenness in experiences throughout the district, and that you have to take a bus an hour and a half to get to a CTE offering, or you need to go somewhere else to get ingenuity programming. So that was kind of a theme, was that throughout the city the services are a little uneven. And lastly, we heard time and time again that customer service needs to improve at the school level, at the district office level, that sometimes response time isn't that great, or not response at all, and just a clarity of responses. And two other things that I left out here are the importance of school leadership. So positively, how impactful a very good leader could be, and also conversely how a not as strong leader can wreak some havoc in the school environment. Okay, so this is the good stuff. This is where we're trying to improve the work that we're doing. So one of the greatest things has been the creation of the Chief of Communication and Community Engagement position, which is Ms. Heike Hubbard, who's over here. This position is really in direct result of what we heard over and over again in the task forces. Ms. Heike Hubbard is overseeing the Communications, Enrollment Choice and Transfer, and Family Community Engagement Office, because all those pieces really are together. We want to give a really great top to bottom service for our families and students, and in putting those offices together, hopefully that will help improve communication and everything about confusion with the choice process. Here at North Avenue, to try and improve customer service, we want to have less stressed out, overworked employees. So we have mindfulness moments where, it could be something like yoga to kind of help people get a little centered during the workday. We also have milestone recognitions for employees. I got a really nice email on my birthday, which I was really surprised. Like, oh, happy birthday. I was like, whoa, that's awesome. So, and then and we're recognizing people here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And, we have people here that have been here for 34 years. And, it'll be nice to have them be recognized, not just at that 34-year mark, but along the journey, to know that they're valued. This year, we also have the REACH Fellowship, which is an in-depth program that people here applied for to talk about really important things such as equity, which obviously is a focus, as you could tell. The Human Capital Office is working on a new orientation for employees where we're going to tie things into the blueprint, kind of give everyone an idea of the great things that are happening in city schools, and not just, this is how you fill out a health insurance form, but really trying to buy in on the mission and vision of what we're doing. Ashley Stewart doing great work. So he's has a professional development academy and is offering Leading from the Secretary's Seat, which is a direct attempt to improve that frontline customer service level offered at schools. All right. Bus route analysis to minimize ride time. So this is something that the Transportation Office is really trying to do. We don't want kids to take 90-minute bus rides to school, so we're really trying to optimize those times. Dr. Nicole Stewart is here if there are questions on this, but we're looking at the intersection of housing and enrollment. We're auditing the CTE programs. I'm reading from the slides, which is something that I know you guys really don't like, so I'm going to not do that. But something that's not on here is the equity director and policy position, which is really, at the heart of all the work that we're doing. And also, I'd be remiss to not mention the blueprint as kind of the founding document of this whole work, because if you don't have high quality programming, it doesn't matter how good the customer service is, because people aren't going to want to go to the schools. So the blueprint really is the key stone of all of this work to improve the schools throughout the whole district. And, once that happens, that'll really put everything in place here. All right. And next up, marketing initiatives. So Day of Play is this really awesome thing that we're doing to try and get people to come out, see all the great things that our pre-K programs are offering, and kindergarten, April 27th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that'll hopefully, people will come, ask questions. Hopefully it'll alleviate some of the questions and concerns about that pre-K enrollment process. And you heard Soccer's Without Borders. We're trying to really highlight those things here and on social media. They're really great things that our kids are doing that often aren't on the news. So one of the things that we're doing is on our new website, we're really trying to bring that to the forefront. And I know I didn't hear any groans about the new website, so that's good. We know that there are some bugs to be worked out. And on April 12th, I'm excited to say that there's going to be some significant upgrades. So,
Joe, on that
Yeah.
point, I just know that when I go, if I just want to find some information on this, this is the only thing I've tried to do, and I've tried to do it like 15 times. If I want to get an information about a school, like I was trying to find something about connections yesterday. So I entered connections in Google, and it brought me to, then I got all my choices, and I went to the city schools website, and it acts like I never asked for connections. And then I got a search, and then when I was searching, then I got test scores. All I wanted was the address of connections. So I would say, this is not the forum, but it's, I don't know about everybody else out there, but it's not true that it's, I find it very user unfriendly if you're just trying to find anything about a school. Yeah.
that concern is definitely noted. So,
Chair Kashani, if I could add, the same happens with individual programs. So say you're trying to find Chanel in the arts department. You can't get her contact, you can't get any information on arts programming, no matter how hard you dig through with Google searching.
With the old website, you pulled up the city schools website, you typed in school, whatever, and boom, there it all was. Now, I felt like I needed to get a new degree to know what to do. Should I scroll through all 170?
it's actually a new CTE offering, how to operate the website at Mergenthaler Vocational.
Just make sure it's universally available across the city, because people aren't. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point here.
Yeah.
I think that we should talk about something that needs to be open for feedback, but whatever we did to set that up, I can't find anything on that website.
So I will just say that I think there's two things. One, there have been challenges that are known, but I also just want to flag publicly the danger in assuming that silence means everybody is happy. Silence can mean disgust. It can mean I just am tired of it. And it can mean I don't have any idea where to give the feedback. So I think it is a flag that we not interpret silence to mean everything is A-okay. And the number of snaps and nods just in this one room says to me that we need to just do some deeper digging. Deeper digging. Yeah.
So
but yes,
the good news here is that on Friday, April 12th, I've been promised, so I'm on the record publicly, so you could shun me personally. Even though I am not a website developer, I will take the blame for it. There's going to be a reduction in bad links, so that's one thing on the record. There are going to be better tools to search for school information, so that directly addresses your concern, Commissioner Kashani, and a refinement to presentation of school profiles. So April 12th, I will be tendering my resignation. No, I'm just kidding. So we have that to look forward to on April 12th. The second to last thing, these are some of the other big recommendations that have not yet been implemented, but I don't want them to seem like they're lost forever. So one, we heard that there should be a single school choice process, meaning with charters, with public schools. That's been a overwhelming feedback that we've gotten from every session that we've had. Another thing was to send out marketing materials to expectant and new parents. We've really tried on this. It's really hard to get that information, but we're not giving up on that yet. Next, customer service is something, we have a detailed plan on how to do that with secretaries. We know that we need to do more, so that's something that we're in the process of continuing to look at. And then also something you might have noticed, there's like a pencil and some really, the front lobby's a little more welcoming, and that's something that we're working more on to have seats in there maybe, to, a warmer environment. So that's something that is down the pipeline. So next steps, schedule additional informational sessions to continue working with people that have been working with us along the way. This is the email address. Any concerns, questions that you have, please feel free. Customer service at BCPS. My name is too complicated, so this one is a lot easier. And I do not want this link to get lost. I believe that this is the correct link that you could get to directly. You don't need to go on the website for it. To find the recommendations from the work groups, because they're still great and we're still using those as kind of a driving force. Questions?
Before I take questions, I want to just make a general comment, having been really involved in that. Before this meeting, I went back and reread all the PowerPoints and all the underlying reports from the working groups, and their virtual blueprints on how to think big about this stuff. And I know there's only so much we can do, but and these are good starts, but it still feels a little bit incremental when some of these things we're recommending just make fundamental overhauls about how we think about culture and climate. I mean, so I don't want to restate them, but I think they're all there, and I really hope we don't lose them. And there were a lot of people who did some pro bono work who are, customer service geniuses and who would still be willing to help. And I'm not sure if we've lost the ability to call on them, but I just don't want to lose with the stuff that was presented from what you heard from the community meetings. It was all ditto. So the good news is it was all consistent with a lot of what came out of the working groups. And I'm hoping, and I'm now looking at you, Tina, I don't know if this is the case, but one of the things that a lot of us felt strongly about coming out of that work was that somebody needed to own that bucket of stuff and feel responsible for enrollment. Like, somebody needs to feel responsible. It's everybody's responsibility, but if it's everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. So Tina raised her hand. That's a really good thing. Seriously, there's the individual initiatives that you've ticked off, which is a great progress, because I know how hard it is in the middle of everything else to start new things. But I really don't want to lose sight of some of the bigger picture stuff. And thanks for holding and hosting and facilitating all the individual sessions, because people felt very strongly about getting access to it. So that's really helpful. So that's the only thing I want to say is I just don't want to lose sight of the big ideas. Commissioner Frank?
Well, first, I want to say that the mindfulness has worked wonders on you, Jill. I don't remember you being so jocular during the process. So and your suit, you look different. I don't know what it is, but this orientation, everyone should go through it. So it's worked wonders on you.
Commissioner Frank, I was going to say that's some Akil Ham level style
There we
going
go,
on
right.
there. So.
But I did want to suggest that when we do this, particularly a year later, we should establish the baseline metrics, and that when we make presentations about the length of time, like how long it takes to get from school to home, that should be the baseline. And if we're decreasing it, that is improving the experience, and that is helping families. And I do think that helps keep kids in school. But we ought to tie these recommendations to the extent that we can to measure. And I don't know that anyone's taking credit for it, but from what I understand, enrollment was pretty flat this year after a pretty big drop. So congratulations for all the good work you've done in the first year. But seriously, we really want to see, I think, how we can measure the improvement around enrollment and see how all this very important work is doing. And then the last thing I would just ask that we make this available to all the members of the task force so they see the district is moving forward in a lot of these things. So thanks.
Other comments, questions? Commissioner McFadden?
Since you mentioned the City Schools Day of Play, this could also be for Chief Hike Hubbard. How are we promoting and advertising this? And are we looking at innovative ways to promote and advertise City Schools events? I think we've spoken about it before outside of social media and robo calls and Global Connect. I'm curious to know if we're changing that, if we're moving in a different direction to think outside the box when it comes to attracting people for events, because those events certainly can serve as opportunities to attract folks to come to city schools. So I'm curious.
So I know that for this, we've partnered with Judy Centers to try and like flyer and get things out like that. I couldn't say if there's anything like quote unquote outside the box that we've done at the moment, but I'm not sure if, do you want to come up on the mic, Ms. Hike Hubbard?
Uh-oh. And what do you have to say for yourself?
2 weeks, that's what I have to say for myself. 2 weeks. So yes, we are getting the word out via social media, reaching out to pre-Ks, Ks, et cetera, duty centers, but we are going to work on a larger strategy for the whole district about how we communicate with families in a stronger way. But I have had 2 weeks. So we will come back to you on that, but this program right now is really exciting. We're excited to get the word out to people, and we'll keep you posted. You're welcome.
Commissioner Hassan?
So just a quick suggestion specifically for that geographic area. That area has a large involvement on the Nextdoor app. And that's a great way that we communicate in that space.
It's a great way to
and that I think there's other neighborhoods that are actively involved in that as well. And that's a way you reach grandparents and people that may not have kids as well that can say to their next door neighbors, hey, did you see about this thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Other comments? So just to be clear, since I think Joe's done a good job at staying with this, my comments weren't intended to diminish the work that's been done. It's just to keep the focus up. I know you get it. Okay, Allison, you got it?
I just wanted to just add my thanks to Joe for spearheading this this has been a long process, and there's been a lot of different, the work the different groups have done and the follow-up afterwards, the engagement with the community, the engagement with staff. It's been a long process, so I thank you so much for the leadership on this. And then I think you're absolutely right, Commissioner Kashani, that this is not something that this is the end of it. This is going to be an ongoing conversation about how do we take on some of the bigger bets, and the bigger bets about really rethinking the culture and the way we engage with families and so on in the school system. And so that's a big task, and there's lots of additional great recommendations there, and it'll be a large part of our focus.
Well, and I think
continuing
as Annie Milley at the end of her report reminded us, just the retention of 400 students year over year over 5 years yields $23 million at the current per pupil funding. So even if your motivation, I mean, you don't need much more motivation than that. This really matters, and there's a lot of stuff in there. It's the punchline on a much larger set of recommendations, but that she hit the bottom line pretty hard. Commissioner Frank?
Yeah, just an extension a little bit on the data. I remember during the task force, we really drilled down into which grades had which increases and decreases, and there was a lot of discussion about why and what was beneath all that. So again, maybe next year we could get a little bit of analysis of what's actually happening from year to year. Where are we seeing drop-offs? Where are we not? And what strategies are tied to those particular categories?
Okay, good. Thank you very much. One more comment, Commissioner Bondima.
I do have a comment for the Day of Play. This is a wonderful promotional opportunity for our public relations and our marketing, whatever department we have, to put out a notice online to everybody. Because when we talk about negatives and positives, I'm always saying that we don't showcase all the beautiful positive things that we do. And this is wonderful. And I think that it's very soon, April 27th. And I would look for some more advertisement. And our TV stations, all 3 TV stations should have notice and a press release that we're having this at the school. And I think that we should get that out as soon as possible. This is a wonderful opportunity to show the beautiful things that we're doing with Baltimore City Public Schools.
We'll work with the communications team to
I
get
didn't
that
hear
done. We'll work with the communications team to get that done.
And just since our friends from the BTU are here, let's remember that while we've been working on this part of the work for a while, it all started on the heels of the B3 campaign. So that was the first sort of kick in the butt to say, come on, let's be proactive about this. So we're going to keep at it and not just be reactive and count the numbers of kids that leave, but let's try to do something about it. Okay, thanks. With that, we're going to turn our attention back to general public comment. As we generally do, if we have elected officials present, we start with them. And we have a representative from Councilman Zeke Cohen's office, Stephanie Mavronis. Stephanie, did I get your name right?
Good evening. My name's Stephanie Mavronis, and I work in the office of First District Council Member and Chair of the Education and Youth Committee, Zeke Cohen. Councilman Cohen sends his regrets. He's at the Mayor's Taxpayers night this evening. 2 weeks ago, the Baltimore City Council passed a resolution for immediate adoption in support of policy JBB, defining gender-based discrimination in city schools. During the Obama administration, the Department of Education and DOJ jointly released guidance on civil rights of students who are transgender. This letter instructed all schools receiving federal funds to provide a safe, non-discriminatory environment for all students. The 2016 guidance encouraged schools to use the pronouns and names that were consistent with the student's identity, allow students to use the facilities and participate in the activities that corresponded to their gender, and improve privacy practices surrounding a student's transgender status. But that guidance was withdrawn a year later by the current administration, leaving students whose gender identities do not fit neatly into a binary vulnerable. GLSEN, a nonprofit addressing LGBTQ issues in K-12 schools, found alarming trends for queer and trans students across our state. The majority of our queer and trans identifying students have experienced victimization and bullying in school. 54% of trans students reported being denied access to the restrooms corresponding with their gender identity in school, while 48% were prevented from using their chosen name. That climate can also escalate into violence. 1 in 10 of our LGBTQ students reported being physically assaulted due to their gender expression or identity. Being able to use the bathroom that corresponds to your gender isn't trivial. Recourse and greater understanding in the face of bullying on the basis of your identity isn't trivial. Neither is being called by your name and referred to with your pronouns. We should equip all educators and staff with the tools needed to serve all of our students. Policy and guidance is one way for the school system to avoid leaving the experience our LGBTQ students have to the individual biases that some educators, staff, and administrators may hold, whether they realize it or not. This policy gives answers to teachers and administrators who may not otherwise know or understand the extent of disrespect, harm, or dehumanization that some LGBTQ students face daily. When we know some of our students are vulnerable and hurting, bullied and facing environments that can be unwelcoming or downright hostile at home and in our schools, we have the opportunity to lead as a city. All students should know that they are seen, respected, loved, and celebrated for who they are, regardless of their gender identity or sexual orientation. On behalf of the Baltimore City Council, I urge you to pass policy JBB today for our students. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Thank you.
Ms. Mavonis. Questions? Commissioner Reed?
Thank you very much, and thank each of you for coming. I appreciate that. I just need to learn more. Like you said, lack of understanding. I think a lot of people like me need to learn and grow. But you said 1 out of 10 are assaulted?
That was a state figure.
And what's the bullied number?
I think the majority, so it was over 50%.
So what can people do, at least among this group and the people in the room, to raise the level of understanding and ameliorate the high level of trauma that you guys get in terms of bullying and insensitivity?
Sure. Well, I hope that this will be an opportunity to learn tonight. It seems like there are a lot of great folks in the room who are looking forward to having the opportunity to speak to each of you directly. And I would say, you know, the single best thing that anyone can do is to follow the lead of the transgender community, to follow the lead and learn from the experiences that students are having within our school system. I know those were state figures that I mentioned, so I'll be really curious to hear how, you know, students speak on behalf of these issues for themselves, teachers as well. This isn't an issue that's limited to our student population. And so I would say, you know, following the lead of the queer and transgender community is the best thing to do, and really, you know, taking those stories and experiences to heart, because, you know, it's a deeper issue than our schools. I think we all have a role to play in making our climate more welcoming and embracing for these students. And I think a lot about the ways that, you know, not everyone who's part of this community has supportive family at home, and they may face a lack of understanding in their own spaces. I think our schools have a big opportunity to play, to make sure that all of our students feel seen and welcome, and like we care about them and are meeting them, you know, where they're at. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
We have, of the 10 speakers tonight, all 10 are speaking on this policy. So we'll have a number of opportunities to ask additional questions on that. Commissioner Hassan?
So I just wanted to say in advance of their speaking that I also really appreciate those that came out to testify during the board work session and forum on this policy that were held earlier this year. We really appreciate the input that those of you who were able to be here. This is a policy that all of us want to get right. And we want to do it well and want to do it right. So it's not a matter of convincing us of the importance or the need, because we are all standing on 2 feet with that. Some in different spaces of understanding and awareness, but never without a lack of understanding that it's essential to have provisions in place to protect each and every child. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our first guest is Keisha Goodwin. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening, CEO, Chair, and School Board Commissioners. I believe that all students and staff should be protected, and this definitely includes our transgender students and staff. I'm here today as a parent asking you to amend the sex discrimination policy before voting or postpone it. When I first heard the policy, it was said that it was a law after Commissioner asked. Yes, the sex discrimination is a law. However, as stated earlier, some guidelines has been rescinded. And according to MSDE, it says that the school and the school system on page 2 may want to consider the following things when students are pre-transitioning and planning. And on page 3, it says several topics may be considered when students transition at a school. It's not just for a student who identify as a transgender girl or who identifies as a transgender boy, but these specific things when it comes to changing names and pronouns, using facilities, extracurricular activities, and sports pertains to transitioning students. I am recommending that the school board uses the trans law as it states for Social Security and Maryland birth certificate, where it says that you must have a certificate and also a letter from your physician. If you turn the pages, you will see the trans law. And on page 3 of 8, it talks about the birth certificate, and on page 2 of 8, Social Security cards. And it states specifically what the state should do in these instances. And I'm recommending that BCPSS follow these guidelines. I'm particularly concerned and have thoughts about sports, whereas we know when students hit puberty that males have higher testosterone, which makes them perform overall better. And this could greatly impact girls in sports, given that they're 6 times more likely to drop out of sports anyway by the time they get to high school. I also would like to know the intensity and outcomes when people want an investigation done. If a student does pronouns isn't used or if their name isn't used, is that same intensity and outcomes for all staff and for all students? Because currently we have a bullying and harassment policy for our students and for our staff, and when they are called out of their name and there's verbal inappropriation, it's only a level 2. So is the level 2 for transgender students and staff as well? If not, then it should be leveled across the board.
So Keisha, I just have a comment. First of all, I obviously just got this, and I appreciate it. Did Allison, did you get a copy, or did Dr. Santelises get a copy, or can you leave an extra copy with the staff? You have a copy? Because I want to make sure I can't speak for the entire board, but I'm unlikely to call for a delay of the vote, but I do think that once you pass a policy, the regulations, the implementation, I think there's plenty of room to use this guidance, and this is a really helpful document. It's a really helpful document. So I thank you.
Will there be further meetings in which that will be publicized if there
Well,
are
I
further
think
guidance for guidance?
I'll say this, and then once the policy's passed, or I'm assuming, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. It moves into the realm of implementation, and we have conversations in this setting all the time that have to do with things that are in implementation about a policy. There's updates on policies. There's what the status of implementation is. So there's not going to be any immediate plan presentations, because we did make sure, starting with the board forum, that there was a lot of opportunities for public input to the policy. So that I felt like we didn't really do more on this one than we did for others, but we did have a lot of opportunities for input. But as we all know, the rubber meets the road at implementation. And so I think we're going to all have to, really keep an eye on this. And as we move through implementation, if there's a need to have further discussions about, anything, that's true for anything. I don't want to single this out. That's true for anything, that we want to have spaces where we can talk about things.
Thank you. I guess that's where my concern really lies, as well as other parents that I've spoken with and educators as well.
Yeah.
Who unfortunately couldn't be here and for some reason prefer to remain anonymous.
No, fair enough. I think if you know as much as anybody that this is a forum. It's not the only forum, but this is a forum where if you have something on your mind, and I know we've had a teacher I'm thinking of in particular that has had things to bring before us any number of times, and it stimulates. We don't just take this in and then just go away. I mean, these comments and these conversations do have impacts on the work that people do in the departments and on the discussions that the board has. So, and again, it's not just about this. It's an invitation on anything.
Mm-hmm.
That you're not shy. If you have something you want to talk to us about, let's just see testing, for example. Just to pick a random idea. No, I'm not. I actually don't mean to joke about that. The things that you say here do matter to us, and it's true for everybody. So we're not going to delay the vote, but we are always open for people to let us know how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what they think we can do better.
Okay, so thank you. I do agree with most of the policy, and those are just my few areas of thoughts.
Yeah, and this is a very helpful document, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, can you hold 1 second, Commissioner Chinia?
No, I just want to mention that what was said in the earlier testimony around the idea of the policy and the guidance and the implementation. But one of the places or that you can consider in terms of more discussion in detail about implementation will probably be at one of our committee meetings. And generally, we do talk about those areas because those are things that then go into the school in terms of actually being carried out.
In some policies, there's compliance reports, and we, annually, and we move them, we don't, they don't always happen at the full board meetings. You know, so the sustainability policy compliance report is discussed at an operations committee, for example. So just, you want to keep your eyes open for that kind of stuff. Thank you. Our next guest is Stephanie Safran. Is that the way to say your last name? Thank you. I know I should know that, but I just,
Good evening, Ms. Kashani, Dr. Santelises, board and staff. It's a pleasure to be in front of you. And I have to say I'm torn right now because I want to share my prepared remarks, but I'm also find it necessary to say that for those of us who have been reading this policy, giving input on this policy, working on this policy for 2 years, it has been hours of our own time, our own research, our own investment, and who showed up at last week's community forum. It is frustrating to see someone who came late to the game and who is frankly spreading ignorances in front of you being given a lot of time and attention for them. And I hope that each of you intends to do your own due diligence and your own research and to ask hard questions about some of the information that was shared with you tonight. I do want to say that my name is Stephanie Safran. I am hoping to speak tonight on behalf of all the gender-expansive children in Baltimore City schools. I think many of you know that my own daughter addressed this board 2 years ago, and again last month, to advocate for policies protecting trans and gender-expansive youth in our school system. I like to let her speak for herself because she's honest and authentic, and she's a fierce and proud advocate for herself and for children like her. But tonight I need to share with you a mother's perspective. What you may not know is that my daughter's first attempts to be recognized and acknowledged as a girl at her school were a miserable failure. Children contradicted her. They mocked her. They belittled her. She cried almost every day, and then she withdrew, becoming essentially a shell of herself. And at first, I was terrified to talk with other parents and other children about it. I was even scared to talk with her teachers and school leaders about it, because our district and our schools had been woefully silent, there's that word Dr. Santelises says, silent, on the topic of gender diversity. And let me tell you, silence is not benign. Silence can be crushing. I did eventually talk with her teachers and her wonderful school psychologist and her principal, and their responses were loving and affirming, but frankly, not as knowledgeable or well-informed as I had hoped. That one right there, Kimberly Mooney, she and the kids of the GSA kept my daughter going when she felt hopeless, and kept her going, frankly, until the other adults got their act together to take care of her. I can't overstate how much I respect and appreciate the willingness of our school staff to learn and to adapt. Cindy Thorne, Mr. D'Ambrosio, the whole second grade teaching team at RPMS are tremendous educators and amazing people. But my daughter should not have had to do the work of teaching her teachers and her administrators and her peers, educating them on basic aspects of gender identity and the fundamental rights of gender-diverse people. The silence of the district made it necessary for her to do that. And there are students all around this district right now suffering under the weight of that silence. We can't change what's in the past, but now is the time. It's time for Baltimore City Public Schools to pass this policy to unequivocally protect trans and gender-expansive students, and it's time for the district to ensure that every teacher, every staff member, and every school leader gets basic education in the facts of gender diversity, as well as guidance in understanding and implementing the specifics of this policy. I know you all agree with me that our students deserve access to an education and that they deserve to feel safe at school.
thank you very much. Questions? Questions? Okay. Our next guest is Alex Main.
Good evening. I'm Alex Main. I'm non-binary. I go to Roland Park Elementary Middle School. And today I was here talking about the JBB policy. So at my old school, Memorial Park, it was really hard coming out as myself because it's in a very dangerous neighborhood and people don't really understand what anything means. And coming out, I got bullied a lot, and I would come home crying and asking to stay home from school, begging not to go back. And then it got to the point where I had to go to a institution, and then I came out from the place, and then I went back to that school, and I was still getting bullied. And then my stepdad got in touch with Roland Park because it's a good school, and I know they have a GSA. And he got in touch with Miss Mooney, and Miss Mooney helped me get into the school. And at that school, I get to help others. I get to educate others about all the terms and what they mean and how you should treat somebody that is part of the LGBTQ plus community and allies. And I also have learned how to help the teachers treat students who don't understand what's going on, and teachers who misgender and use the wrong pronouns and use the wrong names for students. I still get misgendered, and I still have the teachers and students call me by my dead name, even though I wasn't introduced as that. And it constantly happens, and I think this policy would really help that.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Commissioner Hassan?
Thank you, Alex. In the name of educating us, I'm wondering if you or if there's future speakers from GLSEN could help us out. In the documents that Ms. Keisha gave us, it says pre-transitioning and transitioning. Do you consider alignment the more contemporary word for that, so pre-aligning? Or, and I'm not asking you to speak on behalf of everybody who is expansive or non-binary, but I'd like your opinion, and I'd also like to use that as a platform for sharing why the policy committee asked for an annual review on this policy, so that we could continuously update language as language evolves.
Yeah, so I think
I don't think a kid should have to speak on that.
Okay, fair enough.
And
Alex just offered to educate, so I took him up.
Kimberly, you're the next speaker. Do you want to pick up from there?
Yes, Elaine and I were going to speak together, so.
I mean, you can respond to the question. It's not
so-
going to be against your 3 minutes, but
Okay.
I think you can just stay then.
So I'm kind of actually confused about your question. Is the term aligning preferred to transitioning? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
I think that it doesn't matter. I think it's a matter of opinion. Transition is more widely used as far as I know, but for example, for Alex and others who are non-binary, it's not a matter of transitioning. It's a non-binary situation, so it's not there. It
Yeah, I was
doesn't
speaking
apply.
specifically
So-
to the language in the documents that we were given that were discussed previously. So, but that's fine.
I'm not sure which documents, so that's why I'm confused.
I was more just simply taking advantage of the opportunity Alex gave to educate us by saying I would like to be here and help educate. So, but we're
Thank
good.
I think what I'd like to do, we've got a lot of speakers on this. Yes, please, because we've got a lot of people signed up to speak, and I don't want to prolong this I want to let everybody have a chance to speak. Thank you. So, is it Elena?
Alen.
Alen.
I just want to say to Alex, thank you again for coming. I remember you coming. I remember you coming to a previous meeting, and it takes a lot of courage to not only represent yourself, but others, and to be so young to do that. I look forward to seeing you doing more of this advocacy in the years to come, and especially as you grow into an adult. So thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners, Dr. Centelesis, and Madam Chair. I am Alangeli Kerr, and I am one of the co-chair of the Education and Advocacy Committee on the Baltimore City Commission. But today I'm also here to speak on what I do for a living, and I happen to be a Baltimore City school teacher. And I've had very painful conversation with my school leaders and also students about the realities that students face. Earlier, someone mentioned some documents, and I find it disheartening when individuals who are not trans speak untrans in their bodies. And I also find it very painful to hear about testosterone. What right does one have to decide how does one identify is beyond anything I've ever seen. Unfortunately, we live in a society where the obsession with genitalia of trans people have sort of become the norms. And I want to dispel that because this is not about no one's gender. This is about one's safety. And whether or not what's beneath anybody's clothing is no one's concerns, but unfortunately, I have to debunk these nonsense. We are not issuing IDs here, people. What we want is to provide safety for all students and also staff. I remember as a child when I was being bullied because of my identity. And I promised myself through my tears that I was going to become an educator because I want to stand for children when I didn't have no educator stand up for me. And as I'm looking around to see the wonderful support, this is how far we have come as a society. Because I could remember the feeling, the anxiety of knowing if someone finds out about the true me, what's going to happen to me after school? How fast should I run to get to the bus because I have no one to turn to after getting my nose broken by another student? So, in a sense, it's when we talk about safety, when we talk about these things, I hope you all understand that it is a matter of life and death. I've been fortunate to have loving parents that support and embrace me because, I've always said this, because they're privileged. If I didn't have such, I don't know where I would be today. And in a sense, creating our schools to provide these kind of environment, we have the opportunity to make a tremendous difference in not only the lives of our students, but into this community we call home for a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Mr. McFadden?
You're not originally from Baltimore. Tell us where you're from again. I'm curious to remember.
Well, I am, you mean like my origin?
You said you were from somewhere in
Yes,
the southern states, right?
Yes. I am from Miami, Florida.
Exactly, I remember.
But I am of Haitian descent. I do speak French and English, and that's why you can hear the accent come out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's a beautiful last name. Other questions, comments? Thank you very much. Our next guest is Annabelle Horwitz.
Hi, I'm adding on with Annabelle. I'm Rachel Tyler, if that's okay. I'm Rachel Tyler. I am in 8th grade at Roland Park Elementary Middle School, and I am the president of the GSA.
Hello, my name is Annabelle, and I go to Roland Park Elementary Middle School. I'm in 8th grade, and I'm a member of the GSA. Hello, good evening. I am here to talk about the transgender law that is not being provoked across Maryland. I believe that students and teachers often misgender students. They call them by the wrong pronouns. Their parents do not treat them. The people that are being bullied, people try to inform them that they should change their gender when in reality that's not possible. When you stick to a gender for a certain amount of time, you can never change it. Parents try to provoke them, teachers call them by the wrong pronouns, but they're only driving to hurt themselves and others because you're hurting yourself because you're uneducated. And you cannot say something that's not true. I've had people that tell me that they view people as the gender that they were born as, the gender, and they don't view them as who they say they are. They say that it's an opinion, but it's just a false reality. And people need to realize that you cannot drive someone away from something that is not true. You are uneducated and you need to stop being ignorant. And if you tell your children and you tell your students that they need to change, the transition of a gender is not changing your gender, it is expressing your gender expression, and that is how it fits you. So people need to stop being so ignorant and realize that they're only hurting themselves and others.
I am personally not trans, so I cannot speak on every single experience that trans people have had that I cannot experience myself, but I do have a gender fluid sibling that has gone through a lot. So I'm kind of speaking off of behalf of them and a bunch of my friends. I've had a lot of experiences with this. People ask, but what were you born as? What does that matter? That's not something that's important. What's under clothing isn't important. You don't need to know what name is on their birth certificate when they were born. That's not your business. What they tell you, you should believe. You should have trust in people. Everyone has expressions. Everyone needs to express themselves. And again, being silent is not something that we can do. People hold in their feelings, and when you hold it in, it builds up, and eventually it's going to explode.
Thank you, Rachel and Annabelle. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Commissioner Reed?
I think somebody quoted earlier that silence is crushing. And I guess my question to this group is, everybody I've heard speak so far affiliated with Roland Park Middle, is that right?
Elementary middle.
We're
Elementary middle.
We're all in middle school, though.
Except
Okay.
for one.
Okay, so is the rest of the school system being silent out of fear, and you guys are the leaders in terms of GSA? How does that work?
No, I'd say that the whole GSA is pretty active in all of this. We make posters every week and post them all around the school. But I'd say that not many people know. Not many people are educated.
I would say that there's a variation. There are many people that support, there are many people that don't. The teachers tend to be both ignorant and non-ignorant. A few teachers may not support. I think it's more of an ignorance, and the people that do not support is most likely significantly less than the people that do.
So why is Roland Park only here?
I'm not sure.
I am not sure.
We're very loud. We we express what we feel, and we're not going to be silenced. And I don't know if all schools do that.
Yeah, we have a very strong GSA, and maybe that's the reason why.
We know that we're not going to be pushed down. We're gonna flourish. We're not going to let people that you cannot agree with us. That's okay. Everyone has opinions, but you can't push us down.
If there's we have weeks to celebrate certain stuff like bully lockers, we follow the months like Pride Month, and we follow the rights, the days, the holidays, and I don't know if other schools also do that.
Commissioner Hassan?
So this is a question for probably Chief Perkins Cohen or maybe Commissioner Lynn. Is there a way to track which schools have a GSA and to support schools that may need to develop or have enhancement to those programs?
So with the Associated Student Congress, one thing that we are doing this year is trying to expand to our LGBTQ plus community. So we have been trying to look at organizations if they don't have a student government association. Is it a way to branch off of the GSA that's there to kind of build off of that so they can be in implementations like policy JBB or anything like that. So we are tracking some down. A lot of community schools, a lot of schools within the community do not have GSAs, and that's one of the biggest reasons that a lot of students are scared and a lot of students aren't ready to speak out about those issues. But what ASCBC has been trying to do is trying to kind of branch them out and, you know, get involved in student government while simultaneously supporting the community that you abide with. So, yes.
And then I would say as a school system, I think we have some information on student groups in schools that we collect a lot of it through the engagement office. I wouldn't say it's comprehensive. I'm looking at Sabrina to tell me if she thinks I'm wrong, but I think we do surveys periodically. I think we know some, but I wouldn't say that we have a comprehensive database that tells us that.
No, we've actually been working on documenting a lot of student groups, so we frankly, that's been something we've been
I
tracking
have an
for a
answer
while.
to that also. GLSEN, the program talked about before, does have what schools have a GSA, because it's what forms us. It's what helps us. So if you are interested in that, I think you can talk to Ms. Mooney about it. She can give you their contact information. She is a part of GLSEN, so.
Commissioner Bondima?
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and you spoke very eloquently. The students all over the city of Baltimore at different schools are probably having the same issues. And it might not be as many support at their school like you mentioned earlier. And maybe there may be a few that want to start a program there but can't get enough help or people to commit to it. And maybe it's because of the time of the day or time of the week or evening. I highly recommend, because you have such a strong support system here, that the word gets out some kind of way that you can spread the word, and meet on a Saturday. Meet on a Saturday where you can invite students from all over the city of Baltimore and let them know where you're meeting, because they can't meet during the week, but maybe it would be a good location, a centralized location where they can come and, okay, one second, they can come and get all the information and the support that you're giving, and you would be very, very, I'm maybe not surprised, I would bet that your group, this group would be really phenomenal if you could get the word to all the schools and have the students, come
I'd
and
say
meet
that
at
there's
one
an issue
location.
of transportation, though, because lots of parents are not in support of their child being in the LGBTQ community. So how would they get places? And they can't, tell their parents the truth, so.
Yeah, I would like to say that during the week, students go to the people that support them, and that they are harassed by people that don't support them. Oftentimes when they come home, they are showered in love, because it's the opposite of the bullying situation, but it also goes vice versa. On the weekends, the parents hurt them and they are supported at school, or they're just not supported at all. I know members in GSA that just go and they lie about where they're going, or their parents don't know where they are when they go to certain places that have to do with GSA. They have to hide away the truth. So I feel that while some people would be comfortable with lying about where they're going, the parents might track them down, and it would be a great idea to have the situation like a meeting. It just might be hard because of this situation.
I hear what you're saying, and I
Yeah,
really
I'm in full
think-
support of what you're saying.
Huh?
Never
What
mind.
was that?
She's in support.
Yeah, and I would bet that with the city of Baltimore, there are students out there, you might show up. It might be one out of 500, but that student might really need your help. If we could find a location that's centralized, that the students can meet, and Joshua is moving like he wanted to say something, where the students can meet, and even if it's one that show up, that one student could go back to the school in the location and share that information with their colleague at the school. And they could work it out some kind of way. But I think that we're in a trauma state as far as students and what they're doing when they need help and no one's there to help. And you guys seem so organized in what you're doing that it would be great if you could kind of, for some kind of reason, get help to reach out, and it would be really wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad that you put that up, because if people spread the message, that could be a lot of that could be very beneficial. Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I just want to make a point of protocol. When we're doing the public comment, it's not a Q&A for I know a lot of people have a lot of things to say, and that's why we ask people to sign up. So it's not that I'm disrespecting you when you're raising your hand with an answer, but the questions we're directing at the people who are speaking, and it's not that I don't want to hear from other people. It's just a matter of protocol for this part of the meeting. So I just wanted to make that clear. So thank you, ladies. Appreciate your input. Our next guest is Patrick. I didn't ask you how to say your last name, Patrick. Harhai.
Hello, everyone, and Dr. Santelises, this time I'll thank you first for your work and your help in the district. Chair Kashiani, the rest of the commission, and especially the policy committee who heard my testimony in February, thank you. So my name is Patrick. I'm here on behalf of the Baltimore LGBT Commission in my capacity as the co-chair of the Education and Advocacy Committee, and I want to thank my colleague Alen for her work earlier in her remarks. I'm also here as a junior school administrator and a teacher, and I teach a gender and sexuality studies class at Bard High School Early College, which might possibly be one of the first gender and sexuality studies class taught in this district, but I don't want to take credit for that if it's not true. So I want to be brief here. In February, I gave a full testimony to this very board. I cited facts, statistics, I mentioned educational outcomes for transgender students, I mentioned the astronomical rates of bullying and harassment that trans students face, and I also highlighted the way that school teachers and administrators also perpetuate these outcomes through their practices. And yet here we are again today after another round of public comment and speculation and meetings and research and council resolutions talking about something that other advocates such as Kim Mooney and Jabari Lyles have been working on for years. It's high time to get real. So shortly after this vote, the media will either report that Baltimore City has affirmed the rights of trans students or that we denied the rights of trans students. So, to borrow from my previous marks in February, this should be a simple choice. This policy protects many and harms none. Commissioners, which headline do you want to be responsible for tomorrow morning? And really also, and this is off the cuff, Frederick did this first. I think as a diverse district, we should be really disappointed that we're second to Frederick. Thank you. I also grew up in Frederick, though.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments?
I just threw Frederick under the bus.
That's okay. We're in Baltimore. Thank you. Our next guest is Sekou Kasimo. Oh, he's here.
Madam Chair, Dr. Santelises, Commissioners, I'll be 70 in October, and I thought I had heard everything. I am totally opposed to this policy. You should postpone voting on it until the black community has been left out of this discussion. To my knowledge, this is not an ongoing discussion in our community. Maybe it was because we was preoccupied with the school police and that issue, which was the dominant conversation in my community. I just really became aware of this recently. It slipped beneath the radar because of what we were preoccupied with, especially after the shooting at Douglas High School. I think you should really consider the statements that Ms. Goodwin made as it pertains to information on the birth certificate and the application from Social Security, because those are the guiding principles that are going to govern this and that behavior in the community. What I really came here to talk about was the brass knuckles that I found in a pocketbook at the school that had a knife in it. The reason I was able to find it, because it was in a transparent pocketbook. I could look it up and see the brass knuckles. One of the school police officers determined that it also had a hidden knife in it. A visitor to the school and her son had that pocketbook. And my point is, we need to go back to transparent backpacks, book bags, whatever you want to call it, because we need them. The children have a way of packing backpacks, so it takes you 5 minutes to search one. And they coming in 4, 5, 6, 7 at a time. They play these games. They got clothes, change of clothes. They got athletic shoes. They got baseball gloves. You name it, they have them in those pocketbooks, in those backpacks. So between these backpacks and the cell phones, I researched the cell phone policy that I think it was Commissioner McFadden mentioned the last school board meeting. They are violating every negative in that policy. Inappropriate videotaping. There was a fight at the school yesterday. It was videoed and posted for all other students in like a matter of minutes. I was amazed at how fast word has spread that there was a fight outside. And this was before school even let out. Those cell phones creating a lot of problems. They use the phones to organize dice games in different sides of buildings to alert each other when school staff is monitoring the hall, doing a hall sweep. That's when the last bell has rang and they're out in the hallways. The teachers are told to lock the doors. They use them cell phones to do a lot of negative things. And we need to really revisit that policy, and I want to know from you, when is that policy committee going to meet, and can I be a part of it?
We talked the last time about, did we talk last time about taking a fresh look at that on the cell phone?
When we look at the policy budget calendar,
Yeah.
not policy budget, the policy calendar for upcoming years to see where it will fit in the conversion of board rules and the other things that are already on the agenda.
Yeah, so we will be sure to announce it. That it won't be in this, just because of the scheduling, it won't be in this, it won't be before July. But yes, we will make sure you're aware of it so that you can participate in that meeting, because that meeting does have public comment.
One other thing, school uniforms. That policy is so, it must be outdated because they come to school with just the pants but not the shirt. They have to go to 205 and they'll give them a shirt and they still won't wear it. They should be met at the door. If they're not in full uniform, told to go home. They're getting away with too much. They're wearing shorts, skirts, pants, 6 inches above the knee with fishnet stockings. Where did this come from? So we need to revisit these policies that's supposed to control this behavior because it's not working. Not at Douglas High School anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekou. Commissioner Lynn, Sekou, if you could hold for a minute, please.
It's not specifically to him, but it pertains to what he was just saying. I was wondering, considering that uniforms, we can't, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone here, but uniforms, we can't, if someone doesn't have a proper uniform, we can't neglect their education just because they don't have a uniform. So is there a way that we can kind of, because I understand what you're saying, sir, I really do, but we cannot just say you have to go home just because you don't have on certain clothing. But I do think that there's a way around it that we can talk to students. If students are not comfortable with the uniforms, then we can open that conversation up. If students can afford uniforms, we can open that conversation up. But I do think that we need to at least talk about it and open the conversation up for students to at least be heard out before we just kick them out of school.
Okay, we're dealing with students who don't think they're supposed to obey any rules. I don't know what it's like in these middle-class communities with these middle-class children. I'm telling you what it's like at Douglas High School, Forest Park High School, Edmondson High School. They're out of control. They don't think they're supposed to obey any rules pertaining to cell phone, school dress, uniforms, anything. That's what we're dealing with. We living in the real world.
Thank you, Sekou. Our next guest is Nicolette Hanzigjani. I tried.
You did. You did a good job. So I'm sorry, but before my time starts, I'm a school psychologist in the district, and I just want to redirect the conversation a little bit and have everybody take a deep breath in and just recognize that we're in a positive place where we are around a lot of like-minded people. So this is one of my practices that I use with my students. Just take a deep breath and we can talk about it and move forward. Okay, I'm ready. So hello and thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening on policy JBB. As I said, my name is Nicole Hanzigjani. I'm a school psychologist in the district, and I'm speaking on behalf of many school psychologists as part of the Baltimore City Association of School Psychologists. Our organization is here to join the sea of voices calling on board to adopt policy JBB. As school psychologists, we are tasked with supporting with social and emotional growth and safety of all students. This frequently includes students who are transgender and or gender nonconforming. School psychologists are trained to operate from the perspective of using data-based decision-making in all aspects of our work. The National Association of School Psychologists notes that data concerning school-age transgender youth are limited, but what data are available suggests that more action by school officials is needed to ensure schools are settings in which students can thrive. Research also suggests that students who are transgender or gender nonconforming are at a higher risk of abuse and a higher risk of post-traumatic stress disorder in adulthood, has been mentioned earlier this evening. But while there is plenty of research that highlights the challenges that transgender and gender nonconforming students face, we can also speak to their resilience. Resilience is built by having consistent, secure relationships with adults and peers, as well as supportive communities. Anti-discrimination policies are one way that we can build supportive community for all students, but especially our students who may face additional challenges. Policy JBB will bring Baltimore City in line with other districts who ensure that transgender and gender nonconforming students receive the protections necessary to ensure their psychological, physical, and emotional safety while they're in our care. Thank you. I appreciate your time and anticipate your adoption of Policy JBB.
Thank you. It's nice to get that perspective. We don't always hear from the Baltimore City Association of School Psychologists, so that's nice. Questions, comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Justin Garrow. Did I say that correctly?
That's correct. Good evening, all. We've been giving many statistics and information about why this policy is so important. Today, instead, I'm going to share a story. My name is Justin Garrow, and I'm a resident of Baltimore City and a member of the Mayor's Office's LGBTQ Commission and on its Education and Advocacy Committee. I'm originally from Niagara Falls, New York, and I went to a small private school. My freshman year of high school was the most brutal year of my life. The vast majority of my friends were in other classes, lunches, and study halls. Everyone could tell I was different, even if I wasn't out to them yet. I was teased and bullied unmercifully. I had no one that I felt I could go to. There was no support system for anyone who was different. That is, until another student started to attend the school. His name was John. He was different like myself. We latched onto each other for support. However, once he arrived, the other students started to leave me alone and went to town bullying my new friend. People would constantly ask him if he was gay or if he was a girl. He would lie, just like I used to, and he hoped that lying would suffice to get them to leave him alone. They didn't. They would push for more detailed information. They would want to know more about his sex life. They wanted to know intimate details about his supposed girlfriend, who he said was from Canada, just like the cliche. I was afraid to speak up because I was worried about what retaliation would come my way since I had been on the receiving end of the bullying before his arrival. Lunch was the worst. Little supervision and plenty of opportunities to bully and tease without being noticed. It came to a boiling point after about a month. He felt like he had no adult to go to and felt powerless against the constant barrage of hatred and bigotry being slung at him. Going to lunch every day was gut-wrenching. Neither of us wanted to be there, but we had no other option. We never told anyone what was happening. The abuse continued. One day he was no longer there. I didn't know what happened to him or where he went. I had no way of contacting him, and I only heard one piece of information, and that was that he tried to slit his wrist because he was gay and felt he had no other recourse. To top it all off, the other students made fun of this news, saying that he couldn't even slit his wrist the right way to finish the job. To this day, I wish I had done more for this classmate of mine. To this day, I still have no idea what happened to John. To this day, I don't remember his last name. I don't know if he's alive. It's for reasons such as John that I am here today supporting Policy JBB. If a policy like this had been in place when we were in high school, maybe, just maybe, his story would have been different. I hope that we can forge a future in Baltimore City that doesn't include stories like mine or John's. Please vote in favor of implementing Policy JBB for people like John and anyone who has been afraid because of who they are. Please, lives are truly at stake. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Thank you very much. Our final guest is Rahula Stroll.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm going to start by giving 10 of my 180 seconds to Brittany Fleming, whom the Baltimore trans community lost over the weekend. Brittany was a black trans woman, and the mortality rates for black trans women nationwide and in Baltimore City are astronomical and appalling. I just wanted to start by centering Brittany and her existence. But what my main point is different. Last week marked the 12th anniversary of my sister coming out to me. And over the 32 years, almost 33 years that I've been a big brother, it is something that I am more proud of than anything, is the big brother I have been to her. And that moment was one of my prouder moments. It was a moment where she knew she could trust me and she knew she could rely on me. And but in the ensuing 12 years, I learned that she wasn't 100% when she came out to me. She did not know exactly how I was going to react. And I was surprised by this because I went to a liberal hippie high school and I went to a liberal hippie undergraduate, and I was done. I was woke. I knew what there was to do. But I grew up in a fog of heteronormativity. I grew up in a fog, and so I said things that I didn't know were wrong. Commissioner Reed, earlier you said that you need to learn more. Commissioner Hassan, you said you want to get this right. And so here's the way that we learn more, and here's the way that we get this right, is we make sure that when we implement the training aspects of JBB, that we include the groups that are the gay, the trans community. So the GLCCB, the Baltimore Trans Alliance, the GSA, when we are looking to experts to train our staff and our faculty and our administration, those are the folks who need to be running it. Those are the folks that we need to be running everything by. As an employee of Planned Parenthood of Maryland, which is no slouch when it comes to treating gay and trans patients, I have learned so much in my 2 years from the GLCCB and the Baltimore Trans Alliance, and I had to know quite a bit just to get the job at Planned Parenthood of Maryland. So when we're looking to make sure that we get this right, we need to get this right with the experts, and the experts already exist, and they are here, and they are willing to teach. So let's please, when we implement the training, turn it over to the experts.
Commissioner Frank?
This is really a comment for all of you. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but since the word of the day is silence, I want to say this. I wasn't bullied in elementary school because I wasn't courageous enough to come out as a gay man. And as a consequence of staying silent, I did nothing to help the next generation. I didn't do what you did. I wasn't courageous enough to come and much less testify in public to speak on behalf of the LGBTQ community. So I just want to say how much I admire you all. Alex, you and others, how courageous you've been to come here is incredible to me. Thank you, and everyone that's come out tonight. You've made it easier for the next generation behind you, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment. As a result of the public testimony, are there any other items that people want to pull from the consent agenda? Okay, so what I'd like to do first is I want to call a vote for consent agenda items that Commissioner Lynn cannot vote on. So can I have a motion to approve items 8.01, 8.02, 8.03, 8.08, 10.01, and 10.02? Moved by Commissioner Reed. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Bondima. All in favor? Commissioners McFadden, Bondima, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley. Motion passes 9-0 with one absent. No, 8-0 with one absent. Sorry. Now I'd like to call for a vote on the items that Commissioner Lynn can vote on, with the exception of the two that we're going to pull. So can I have a motion to approve Items 8.04, 8.07, 8.09, and 8.10. Commissioner Chinia moves, second by Commissioner Reed. All in favor? Commissioners Lynn, McFadden, Bondima, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley. Motion passes 9-0 with one absent. Yeah. Okay. The first item that we're going to pull for presentation and then a vote is item 8.05, Policy JBB, Sex-Based Discrimination Students, second reader. That helps.
It does. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Sarah Cabrera, the EEO at Title IX Compliance Manager for Baltimore City Public Schools, and I'm here to present the second reader for the proposed JBB policy. Consistent with the request from the first reader, I did conduct a public forum, a principal forum, and had correspondence sent to me, usually via email, either being directed at me specifically or sent to me through forwarded messages that were sent to various board members and to the CEO's office. And I would like to discuss a couple of those instances. The focus group that was held with the principals was held last week on the 2nd. We had approximately 6 principals arrive and discuss the policy, the proposed policy. They indicated certain issues that they had with language regarding the discipline of those individuals who are responsible for upholding this policy. None of them discussed being against the policy. The public forum that was held that same evening was held in this room and actually had more people than are present here at this moment. There were over 100 people that came to the public forum and were permitted to speak as much as feasibly possible. I think that we had several breakout meetings, if you will, or discussions after the forum and discussed the concerns that those individuals who had indicated that they were a little concerned about the issues raised in the policy were brought up. Yes.
Commissioner Frank?
How did you advertise that forum?
So that was advertised through Facebook initially and through school's calendar, and then it was sent to several members of the school community, so parents, it was sent to the ILADs, it was sent to outside community members, so GLSEN and the LGBTQ Commission. And so a lot of word of mouth helped in that as well. And I know that it was slated for Twitter, but I'm not sure. I do know that Councilmember Cohen had placed on his Twitter account the announcement of the meeting. And it was also through School Connections as well. It was very, very well attended. So, and so the correspondence that I received was from both sides, from those who are objecting to the policy and those that are in favor of the policy. And those are all emails that I have printed out and saved, if you would like to see them. Okay. So the biggest thing that has changed in the policy, the presentation is fairly the same, but I do want to get to one point that was changed. And so this piece that's going into the policy has been changed to reflect each Baltimore City Public School student as opposed to all Baltimore City Public School students. That's the largest, the biggest change in the policy, in language with the policy. And then there's subsequent language, again, dealing with the discipline of those who purposely violate the policy. Again, none of the definitions were changed. Gender-based discrimination remains the same. The use of names and pronouns, dress codes, access to gender-segregated facilities, athletics and physical education, student records and name and gender change. My apologies. I'm getting over some bronchitis. So the regulation is all the same as well. Well, I'm sorry. It's one slight change, and that is just to indicate that where the principal is not conducting the investigation and my office would be conducting the investigation, it just clarifies that for the purposes of the presentation. But in the regulation, it's already outlined. That surmises any changes in the policy. Again, these are the various community and members that were contacted for this policy: the LGBTQ Commission, the Disability Rights of Maryland, the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, PCAB, Maryland Legal Aid, Maryland Alliance of Public Charter Schools, GLSEN, and ACLU of Maryland, some of who have provided feedback as well.
Comments, questions? Commissioner Lynn?
I have a question, then a comment. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening.
I know you answered this question, but just could you remind me, what about the emancipated youth that are talked about? How are they eligible to go about this process of changing names, and if they are not eligible to see a physician, or if they're not eligible for the Social Security or the birth certificate, how would that go about, or do we not have jurisdiction in that area?
So as an emancipated youth, you would be expected to be able to avail yourself of any right that you would as if you were an adult by having reached legal age, right? So it would apply, the same would apply. So if an emancipated youth had a Maryland state identification as opposed to a driver's license, it would be the same. And that's actually provided for in Comar, which I have here for you. It is how the state has adopted how people would be able to change their name. So an emancipated youth would be able to change their name, going through the same process that an adult would, or an adult or a child with the consent of an adult.
Okay, thank you. And I'd just like to say to everyone that's here, I know there were comments made earlier about the Black community not being a part of this conversation and not being a part of this type of policy. But as an African American gay man in America, being young, it is very hard to speak out about things, and it's very hard to speak out in open sessions like these. And I really would like to congrats and, bow down to everyone that's been brave enough here to speak on behalf of them or their GSA or anything. I would like to say on behalf of me, as well as any other gay person that has been conversing with me, we have been talking about this conversation, and we have been talking about this being gay and Black in America, because it is hard. And it's very hard to, come out, like I said, or come out and talk to these about things. So the Black community is not absent in this conversation. And I just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that, and that we are here with you guys, and that I am not trans, but as being a part of the LGBT community, it is very crucial that all of us have the same rights as everyone, and that we are treated equally. So thank you, guys.
Before we take a vote, I just want to add that one of the things that I believe individual members and this board as a whole prides itself on is being open to all forms of expression. So we are respectful of anybody who wants to come and speaks before us, and regardless of what somebody's point of view is. I can say with certainty, though, that we do not conduct policy review and forums under the cloak of darkness. This has been available to everybody to have comments on, and people have done a good job. A lot of people have reached out to us, as they have to you, Sarah. And if people feel like on this issue or any other issue, you feel like we have dropped the ball on letting people have opportunities for input, please let us know, because we work very hard to do it openly. And I do believe on this one, this conversation has been going on in the community for a long time, and at the board level for a couple years now. So felt challenged on that and actually don't agree with it. So I just wanted to clarify that. With that, I'd like to call for a motion to approve, where are we here? Policy JBB, sex-based discrimination. Moved by Commissioner Hassan. Do I have a second? Second by Commissioner Lynn. All in favor? Commissioners Lynn, McFadden, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Frank, Berkeley. Motion passes 8-0 with 2 absent.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for your leadership. The reason we're pulling policy, item 8.06 is that policy BGB, this is a much lower, where's the lady that wanted us to breathe? All right, now you can exhale because this one is, like, the temperature can just go down now, right? We're good. Policy BGB provides that policy changes must be presented at a public board meeting for a first reader, followed by a vote to adopt, reject, adopt with amendments, or refer the draft policy for further study at second reader. We'd like to make a motion to have a waiver on that. So I'd like to ask for a motion. Commissioner Chinia?
Excuse me. I hereby move that policy BGB is waived to permit the board, upon majority vote, to amend policy BEGB without going through the reader process, and that the board approve the amendment to policy BEGB to incorporate a procurement section for the Chief of Communications and Community Engagement.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Hassan? Moved by Commissioner Chinia, second by Commissioner Hassan. All in favor? Commissioners Lynn, McFadden, Hassan, Chinia, Kashani, Reed, Berkeley. Motion passes 7-0 with 3 absent. And for those of you who don't know what just happened there, since we created a new chief position, we just need to create space on the procurement agenda for her to have items to be brought before the board.
So clarifying question, Madam Chair. We voted to waive the reader policy. Now we need to vote on the amendment.
It was all incorporated in the
all in one?
language.
Okay,
It's all incorporated in the, yeah, you missed the vote.
Okay, and
So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that because the letters are very confusing. Okay, so with that, we have jumped to the bottom of the agenda. It's not usual that the presentation of the budget is anticlimactic. As we've said a couple times, these are not normal times, so we would like to call for a presentation on the fiscal year 20 budget. That was really just to, where's the breathing lady? I'm still trying to. That's what I call a $1 million meeting.
Good evening. I'm John Walker. I'm the interim chief financial officer, and with me to my right is Chief Jeremy Grant Skinner, chief human capital officer, Chief Allison Perkins Cohen, who's chief of staff, and Lynette Washington, who is our chief operating officer. And tonight we're here to do a presentation on the proposed 2020 budget for Baltimore City Schools. And we will start our presentation going through some of the budget landscape. And for that portion of the presentation, I'll turn it over to Chief Perkins Cohen.
Thanks, John. So we're happy to be here tonight to present on the FY20 budget. And so I'm going to start with just kind of an overview. First, Ann Fullerton wanted to make sure that I let people know where they can find the budget book online. So it's at our URL for that is www.baltimorecitysschools.org/budget. So first, I just wanted to give an overview of the budget landscape. Seconding what Dr. Santelises said earlier, I want to just first thank the delegation for the passage of the Kerwin legislation. Our delegation really had to do a lot of work to get the Kerwin legislation passed this year, and that was it was a Herculean task that they got it done, and so we're very appreciative to our delegation. I also want to go back and also thank our delegation for getting the Bridge to Kerwin passed. So this year's budget is the third year, if people will recall, when in 2016, when Dr. Santelises first started, we inherited a significant budget gap.
But it wasn't really an inheriting. I think of it as a welcome basket.
I see. Yeah, either way. It was really quite a gift. We didn't quite know how big it would be, but it was $130 million big, which was pretty big. And so we spent our first year trying to figure out how we were going to close that gap. And the first year, the legislature gave us a 3-year commitment of $60 million a year between state and city funds to support us. And this FY20 is the last year of that 3-year commitment. So if it were not for that 3-year commitment, given that Kerwin, the full implementation of Kerwin is a little bit delayed, if it weren't for that 3-year commitment, we would be in a much worse situation.
So Allison, just quickly, the bridge, we passed that bridge this session?
No, so in
Are you talking about previously? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
previously.
thought there
This
was
is the
another
third
bridge.
year of that bridge.
Okay, I thought there
No,
was another.
that was the third year of that bridge, and so it was to keep us until the full implementation of Kerwin. We haven't quite reached the full implementation of Kerwin, but it did. It's allowed us to put our budget together this year. So part of the landscape, the context I want people to understand right now is that we are in a point of time where we had to put a budget together for FY20. However, the legislation that it was critical to give us information about what resources we would have and in what form we would have them really just passed this weekend. So the legislature's sine die was yesterday. It just passed this weekend. So what we're presenting to you today is the budget with the resources we knew we had, but it doesn't reflect what we are getting through the most recently passed legislation. So we'll be coming back with a supplemental appropriation to talk about the implications of that funding. So with all those thanks to everybody to keeping us somewhat stable, I will just point out that the resources that we have still remain significantly below the level of need and below the state's own estimation of the resources that we should have. So I just want to keep the context for everybody that developing a budget is incredibly difficult in the funding situation that we have. So by the state's own estimation, we've been underfunded by $290 million if they just had inflated the current Thornton formula, or in their new APA study, it's $358 million a year. So that's a big gap to try to close when you're developing a budget, and so that's a challenge. The other piece of context is that, again, because of the point in time of when the legislation passed, this is far in the process in terms of when budgets need to be developed for schools. So school budgets need to be developed much earlier, and we've done that work, because schools have to decide who they're hiring and what positions they need so that the human capital team can start their work of starting to fill those positions. So So we had to get resources out to schools, and we did what we always do at city schools, which is we funded schools first, and we really put the priority on getting resources to schools. So that did create a challenge in that some of the resources that we had left over for centralized priorities were quite tight, and we haven't fully funded all the things that we plan to with centrally yet. So that's one of the challenges that we had. And then the last piece is that going back to that bridge to Kerwin from 2 years ago now, we have worked really hard to make sure that we're doing our part to use effectively the resources that we have. So we've really made sure that we are funding priorities and identifying the most important things that we think are going to move the needle for students. So that's really the blueprint. And then also equity is a large part of everything we're doing in terms of how we're implementing the budget. So in terms of priorities, I won't talk about this too much because Dr. Santelice has talked about this. There has been a lot of work this year to engage at the school-based level to get the community into engaging in the priorities for the schools. And then we also did a series of district meetings to get input from community members, which again, we'll talk again about in a few minutes. On the Kerwin funding, these are the main, these are the buckets of funding that we received under the Kerwin funding. So resources to match teacher salary increase or to provide teacher salary increase for our certified teachers, special education funding, some support for tutoring for struggling learners, some mental health, one mental health coordinator, and then the biggest bucket for Baltimore City Schools is the concentrations of poverty money. That we are still spending a lot of time, we're going to have to put a lot of time into thinking about how to use those resources in Baltimore City. This is resources that are dedicated to any school that's 80% or more poverty. Using the 2016 data, they identified 130 schools for Baltimore City that were in that position, and so the legislation allows school systems with a large number of schools to develop a centralized plan for how we'll use those resources, but there are still a lot of restrictions on what we can use it for. So it's going to take us a little time to really dig into that and try to think through and work with the schools. Those schools that have been identified as poverty have to be part of a conversation about how we'll utilize these resources.
Commissioner Frank?
Allison, for the concentrations of poverty, 130 schools out of how many?
Out of 171.
And that includes charters and traditional?
Yes,
Okay.
and so some of those 130 are charters as well.
Thanks.
So then the next part is how we've really tried to take the resources that we have and prioritize them on our most important initiatives. So the blueprint being one of them. So the blueprint, as you recall, is our guide for how we're implementing our key strategy, which is focused on literacy, student wholeness, and leadership. And throughout all of this, there's a focus on equity and ensuring that we are providing high-quality opportunities to students throughout the district and providing a range of good quality options for all students throughout the district. So the first part of the blueprint is the focus on wholeness, and so there's a number of key actions that we've taken. We're still in the first cohort of intensive learning sites. So this year and in the current school year, we have 15 student wholeness sites that are focused on restorative practices, and then we have 20 wholeness sites focused on social and emotional learning. In the next budget year, we will add new cohorts for both wholeness and for literacy. And so for wholeness, we will be adding 21 new intensive learning sites. And, you know, as we're doing this work, we're learning as we go. And we've really identified that that incorporating restorative practices and social emotional learning together, that those two really work well together and that they kind of support each other. So those 21 new sites will be focused on, will include trainings for teachers on restorative practices as well as social emotional learning. That includes support for 21 student wholeness specialists. And then we've also this year really prioritized that all schools should have at least one social worker. So in the budget, we've prioritized that, and every school will have at least one social worker. And then we've also done a lot of professional learning on restorative practices and then de-escalation strategies.
Can you just comment on the impact of having a social worker in each school? What's behind that, and what do you expect to see from that investment?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think students, part of our student wholeness strategy is that our students, we need to provide a range of supports for our students. And so it's making sure that we're addressing all of our students' needs. Their social, emotional needs are just as important in terms of their academic success. So social workers provide vital supports to students in terms of helping identify supports that the student or family needs, working with students in times of crisis, the really critical positions in schools, and we haven't been able to provide enough support. Even one per school is really, frankly, not enough support, but it's getting better in terms of providing the kind of emotional support we need for students.
So, piggybacking off of what Commissioner Frank said, even though if we do implement this one person in this position, is it really, I mean, we don't have the funding to put, 3, 4 in one building, but is there a way that we can move around, like, the idea of one person dealing with 1,000 different students' emotional and social problems in life, or even, like, a school like Mercantile with 1,000+ students and so many students? How is it one person going to help everyone with dealing with 1,000+ students? How are we going to do that?
So I see Jess looking at me from behind your chair because I think she's trying to signal, and tell me if I didn't get your signal, but I think what she's trying to signal is that that's the floor. We're making sure that everybody has at least one, but it's a ratio, so it's relations to size. So larger schools will get more, but again, I think the ratios that we have, that we fund, are not sufficient. And so in our document that we put together this year, a world-class education for students document, we have a higher number of social workers per students because we really don't have, that is a support we would like to see more of, and hope that as Kerwin funding is actually implemented, those are some of the kind of supports we would like to fund.
And for school counselors, same thing. I would like, how is that? Are we going to increase that as well? Or is that going to stay the same? Because I know for a lot of schools, there's one school counselor for the entire school, or even one school counselor for one grade, but still that's not enough because the grade has 300 or 400 students in it. So is that going to increase, or are we going to keep that same?
So counselors are another strategy that we think is incredibly important for students who, for example, are first generation college, trying to get into college and navigate that process. Having just had my own son go through it, and both my husband and I have been to college, and it was incredibly hard to navigate. And so we need more of that kind of support for students who don't have as much support at home. And so that's something we really agreed that we need to provide more support. We are hopeful that that's some of the kind of supports that I think we'll think about in terms of this concentrations of poverty money, and is there a way that we can provide some of the supports there? And I hope that Kerwin will continue to fund that in the future.
Commissioner Bondima?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to put at least one in every school. However, thinking about the market out there for social workers, and will you be going to University of Maryland School of Social Work to recruit? And are there enough out there? Are there enough social workers out there to be able to place one worker or more into the schools? I'm thinking, because that's one program. I know Morgan State University has a program, and it's a very difficult program to graduate out of. And University of Maryland, they have a program. How many do we have in the school system there? And how would you go about recruiting for these students? I mean, for the social workers?
I'm sorry, the offhand, I do not know the exact number, but we have about 2/3 of our schools right now have at least one social worker. And again, to Allison's point, that some schools have multiple social workers. It will be a challenge to find social workers for every position, but we will do everything we can to do so.
So will you start recruiting now? Were you having programs where you, workshops, not workshops, but,
Like a job fair?
Yeah, job fair.
Yeah, I'll say as an existing position, it's something that we've already had, a job posted for
Okay.
next year for some time, and we will continue recruiting to fill that, knowing that now we'll be seeking more people than what a few months ago we may have expected to be recruiting.
Okay, thank you.
We've decided to put a lot of challenges on Jeremy and his team this year. So between the social workers and the intensive literacy sites with the literacy coaches and the homeless specialists, and then now we'll have community schools folks and nurses. So we thought Jeremy was bored. We wanted to try to give him some opportunities for growth. So you're welcome, Jeremy. Literacy. So on the literacy sites, we currently have 20 intensive learning sites that are literacy focused. We will be adding another 20 next year. In both, I think we've just learned a ton with our homeless sites this year and the literacy sites, and really have seen really huge momentum in those schools. I think the schools themselves have become really reliant on these kinds of support. So I think the homeless rooms, I was in a school a couple weeks ago where it was a larger school, to Commissioner Lynn's point, that in that case for that support, they felt that the one support we were providing them of a homeless room was not sufficient for a larger K-8, and that the grade distinction between elementary and middle school was such that a homeless specialist working with elementary students, or a homeless room that was going to serve elementary and middle school students, didn't really work. So that principal was putting their own resources in to have a second homeless room and a second homeless specialist. But I think principals are finding that very valuable. And I know we had one of our coaches here earlier. I don't know if she left. Looks like she left. She was part of the group earlier, but the coaches to a person, I mean, I think the recruitment that Human Capital did, and then the selection that the academics office did on the selection of the coaches have just been outstanding. It has taken us a while to get them, but they have been outstanding, and we just kind of got some feedback from the schools, the intensive literacy schools, and got really positive feedback about how vital those that resource has been to schools in the short period of time that those principals really are relying on those coaches. So this is an important investment, and we're going to keep making sure we find a way to support it. Leadership. So leadership is, a critical part of the blueprint as well. So there's a lot of exciting things going on with leadership. I think the Jeremy's team has really put a lot of thought into what we should be doing with regard to leadership. So there's the extra support that we're putting in place for new teachers in high-need schools. I mean, one of the things we've seen, and I think partly through the Black Teacher Recruitment Group, is that that teachers were not providing them enough support to stay. And so one of the things we've really prioritized this year is providing some additional support to teachers in our hardest to serve schools, so they can get the support to be successful and that they will stay longer. We also created a district office fellowship program for managers in the central office to do some skill building. They're going to get some one-on-one executive coaching, but again, we're trying to develop leaders throughout the organization. And then Joe mentioned it in the enrollment task force work, but we've also done training for secretary leadership programs that so far about 70 have participated in the program. That includes leading from your seat. So how do you effectively, provide leadership from that position, which is, as a lot of people who know schools know, the secretary is engaging with most people who come into a school building, so it's an important position. And then also some more like technical PD supports for secretaries.
Just one question on that. This is not to question these things, but the principals are notable by their absence on this list? Is that just because these are the special things that we're doing? I just want to understand, because I think I've come to understand that if you don't have an excellent principal, you're kind of.
So we're doing a lot with principals as well. I think a lot of the supports we've put in place for principals we put in place last year, so some of these are new things this year, but we're being very strategic about principal placement, for one thing, about where we're placing principals in terms of schools that that where there's a good match or where they need a high level principal. Principal recruitment has been a big focus, so Roxanne Four on Jeremy's staff does a lot with principal recruitment, as well as principal development, so creating learning networks of principals and supports for principals.
That's helpful. I think that's what I was looking for. Just are we sort of doubling down on things that we're started to stick with them? And I just want to
we're sticking with that, and assistant principals too are getting supports too through that. So there's a lot going on with the school level leadership.
Okay, great.
And then, as you all know, there were some community meetings where we really engaged with the community to get a sense of what their top priorities are. So I won't go into all this because there's a lot more to go on into tonight, but, this was important to us to hear from the community. And so you'll see there's a lot of alignment between the top priorities that we heard from the community, and then we tried to be responsive to that in terms of what we funded. So there was a lot of interest in social emotional learning or climate. So we just talked a lot about what we're doing with some of the social emotional learning work we're doing or climate work. In addition to some things I mentioned, there's also professional learning for trauma and informed care, or I mentioned de-escalation training. There's also access to a well-rounded education, so that's part of our equity focus. So we're making sure that all high schools have advanced placement courses, so we want to make sure there's high-quality, rigorous academics available to all of our high school students. We also expanded access to Algebra 1 in the 8th grade, so that's been another priority. And then there's also a new curriculum in computer science that will provide those opportunities to a range of students. And then the last piece would be the partnerships, the teacher capacity. And so we talked a lot about the literacy sites, but then there's just generally a lot of professional learning opportunities tied to the new curriculum we put in place this year, Wit and Wisdom, which, is a incredibly rich, rigorous curriculum. It has not been without its challenges to implement it, but it is, I think we're getting a lot of positive feedback from teachers feeling like while it is challenging to implement this, that they can see the level of rigor that's in their classrooms and their students engaged in high caliber quality work.
Commissioner Frank?
Yeah, I know there's a ton of information to fit into the presentation, but sometimes I wouldn't be bashful in the sense that you're saying what we're doing, but you're not saying where we were. So I'm curious, for example, advanced placement courses in all high schools. That's huge, as I understand it. Where were we prior to that? And similar with some of these others, it would be useful
On AP, literally it has been building back what was decimated. When I left as CAO, we had at least one AP, many more in every high school in the district. I returned 3 years later, and when I say decimation, it was decimated. Like there were high schools where there were no AP, and so it's a credit to the teaching and learning team, the college and career readiness team, and I do think that context is important when we talk about growth. So
and equity.
Absolutely, in equity, and I think Dennis Jutras isn't here tonight, but it's part of that building back, and I think the board and frankly the public should appreciate not just to kind of celebrate the building back, but I will tell you, we do better as a community when parents and families are the stewards of what quality education looks like. Like the fact that AP classes were decimated in this district over a 3-year period goes back to kind of references earlier about things being done in cover of darkness. That was something that was done in cover of darkness, and that part of inoculating that kind of thing from happening again is making it an explicit part of the budget process. So, and frankly, it's a credit to staff who, we actually should have been in a place where we were expanding, but it ended up being building things back. So I think it's an important notion to make sure we have the
On this
benchmark.
slide, for his comment, 3 things, now that you said it, the advanced placement in all high schools, expansion of access to Algebra 1, and then the significant increase in fine arts certified teachers. It's hard to appreciate how big that is if we don't know the start. Are we going from 20 to 80? Are we going from 42 to 46? It just would be helpful. Those are the 3 that jump off the page at me.
Okay, now I'll go through a little bit of the numbers, which is probably the least exciting part of the presentation, but.
No, Mr. Walker, because you're doing it.
We will go.
It'll be very exciting.
We will go through the numbers, but before we start, I know this has been said in the CEO's comments, and it's also been said in the introduction to this presentation, but the budget that we're presenting to you tonight will not include any of the legislation that was recently passed or any of the potential additional dollars that may come, down the road, because there just wasn't time. And the legislation is written in such a way that there are certain strings attached, and there are certain things that we need to make sure that we are able to cover before we're able to be able to disperse those funds or to allocate those funds properly. So we're not exactly sure how that's going to work out towards the end. And what we have done in the meantime, in order to get our proposed budget to you in a balanced fashion, is we have increased the amount of money that we anticipate that we may have to take from the district fund balance in order to balance it at this time, with the hope and the expectation that once we figure out how this state money is going to go, we won't really need that amount of a draw from our fund balance, but we won't know until such time as we've had an opportunity to go through and look at it. That additional stuff will probably come through as a supplemental appropriation that will come sometime before the end of the year. We're kind of tied up in our timing because we have to have our budget submitted to the local government 45 days prior to the beginning of the fiscal year by state law. So we have to get it to the city no later than May the 15th. And so we have to back up from there. So we don't have a whole lot of time in order to get our budget done. So I just wanted to present that.
Commissioner Hassan?
Just a quick question on fund balance. So if we dip into it, will it still stay above the 7% minimum?
It's 3%.
Oh, no, it's 3 to 7%. It will stay above the 3%.
But it won't, as this board has asked that it stay at 7 in the
No, it's
past.
the policy's 3 to 7.
Correct.
Yeah, it's
So
not been,
that's-
it's not been
I'm
7 for
I'm
some
trying to get a
time.
realistic picture
It's not,
of where the,
yeah, it's not been 7 for some time. It just has to be between.
It's not
3
7
and
now,
It's not
is
at
it?
7 now, I don't.
It's not 7 now.
It hasn't been for a while.
But we will keep it above the 3% in their undesignated fund balance. And like I said, we don't anticipate that we're going to have to be able to do that, but I need to present you a balanced budget, so that's the way we had to do it at this particular time. So I just wanted to put that out there at the front so that everybody knows where we're going. With that said, I'll move forward quickly. This first graph just gives you an idea of what the enrollment change has been with the district over the past few years, and these are the enrollments that are used in the state funding formulas that provide the district the dollars that we receive. And as you've been told, or as you saw in the beginning of the presentation, our revenues at this point are flat. They're even. They're pretty much exactly what they were in fiscal year 19, but our expenses have gone up. So we have found additional efficiencies, and we've been able to do some things to make things go. But that's the reality of the situation right now. Our revenue is flat.
Could you go back for a second? I had a question. So I'm going back in time a little bit. So for fiscal year 18, were we saying that if we had 76,000 then, were we saying that, we're going to get 74,000 now? Like, what was the difference in us, what's the word I'm using? Projecting the enrollment rather than the actuality of it.
We had projected back in fiscal year 18, we projected that our enrollment would continue to go on a downward trend for a period of time. I'd have to go back and check for you to make sure how close we actually got 3 years ago to what they actually came out to be. But we did project and we did anticipate that there would be a declining enrollment over that 3-year period.
I was just asking because if we're continuing a downfall, but I just want to know, like, are we still in the range of the downfall that's actually happening, so that way we understand how much money we're implementing and
For this year, our projection for September for next year, the projection that we use for purposes of our school allocations was only a couple hundred students less than it was this year. So it kind of flattened out a little bit. Now, whether it'll hold that way when we get to September, we'll still have to wait and see. But the estimate that we did for now was only a slight decrease for purposes of this budget. Okay. So the total revenue allocation, we have our general fund of $1.162 billion. That's the district's major spending fund. We also have our special grant funds. They mostly come from the federal government, Title I, Title II, and so forth, at about $104.9 million. And then we have our enterprise fund, which is actually our food and nutrition or cafeteria fund at $55.3 million. for a total proposed budget of $1.322 billion. This is how the revenue projections break down. I won't go through them each time, but you see the state revenue and the revenue from the city of Baltimore. We also get some general fund revenue from the federal government in the form of E-rate, and that's what you see with a slight decrease there. Our other revenue, income from investments, other things that come in during the year, that's an estimate that we put through. And as I said before, we are recommending, at least for this proposed budget, that we have a contribution from fund balance of $22 million in fiscal year 20. This next slide, and I won't go through it, this just breaks down all the different categories that are in a state funding formula and shows the fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 revenue from the state portion of our budget. This next slide, in the same way, gives you a summary of the special funds and some of the major grants. The largest, of course, being Title I and IDEA. These are the ones that are pretty much, these are our, mostly our federal grants that are given out for specific purposes. This shows you our Title I summary from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 20. You'll see that the dollars have, they've gone up over the years, and we've also been able to increase allocations to the schools over the years.
So I have a question on this slide. I probably should know this, but I can't remember. Our dollars are going up, but the number of schools that are getting money is going down.
Yes.
Can you help me understand that a little bit?
Yeah.
Good evening, Teresa Jones, Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer. So what you're seeing reflected here is largely the function of the change in the poverty measurement, going from what used to be free, when we had the free and reduced meal applications as well as direct certification. So each year now, for Title I purposes, we're actually using the direct certification data to determine the poverty rates. And so part of what is happening here is that overall, if you look at the district's poverty rates, they appear to be much lower than what they've been historically because we no longer have the application data factored into the poverty rates.
I thought
As it relates to that's for funding purposes in terms of how funds are coming into the district from a state standpoint. It doesn't affect Title I. So Title I allocations to the district are based on census data. Each year we go through a process of reviewing our data, our poverty data, to determine which schools will be identified as Title I, and then they have to be served in rank order. Some of what you see reflected here is because we've had a number of schools that have been closed over that period of time, so that affects some of the decreases. And then we have had a couple of schools, because their poverty rate has decreased significantly, where they're no longer considered Title I. So as we've tried to manage through these transitions, it's still a challenge for us to be able to get resources to schools, but it's indicating that we can't rely on Title I solely as a way to address poverty in the ways that we've had in the past. That's part of the reason that for the Fair Student Funding redesign work, that we tried to factor poverty into that formula, so that would provide another source of resources for schools that we anticipated over time would be impacted in part because of these changes in poverty measurement.
Yeah, I probably had that explained to me 10 times, but that was just real. I was conflating the federal, state. Very helpful. Very helpful. Thanks, Teresa.
Okay, this next slide, real quickly, is just shows again the enterprise fund. That's our food and nutrition fund. That shows the revenue from there, and our contribution from fund balance. That rounds out the revenue sources that are in the proposed budget for fiscal year 20. Now, if we go through the allocation side of the budget, our overall allocations in the general fund are $1.162 billion. $780 million of that is direct school allocations, and the additional is centrally budgeted allocations, many of which go to schools.
And once again, like a broken record, every single year, one of us, I'll do it because Andy didn't have a chance to say it yet, there should be some slide in here someplace where you can tell what percentage of the $1.162 billion goes directly to schools, whether it's centrally budgeted or direct school allocations. We got it better last year, but I looked through it last night and I went through it, I couldn't find it, so I'm sorry, it's just,
Okay, you're
for the,
right.
just for
You're
somebody
right.
who just like, and we get asked, people want to know, they're sitting in their seats calculating, I got out my calculator, as soon as I got to this page listed, I got out my calculator. And I know it's wrong, it's not 65%, it's something higher than 65%, but it's, anyway, you're gonna get that question every,
You're right, that's one we
year.
missed. I'll take that one.
You're welcome, Andy.
This next slide just gives you a bit of an idea of what we did new this year in the schools, for the school allocations and the development of their budget. It gives you a little bit of an idea of how schools hosted meetings to discuss their priorities at the start of the budget development process. This next slide gives you a little bit of an idea of what went on in the development of school budgets, starting with the school priority engagement sessions, going through the school funding allocations that we gave to the schools. Schools then had community budget forums. We went through budget collaboratives with the schools, and then the schools have or will have community budget reviews. The direct school allocations, this just gives you a breakdown of how it went. $333 million went through the Fair Student Funding Formula as either foundation money or as weighted funding, as you can see. We also had our locked funding of approximately $215 million. That's broken down between general ed and special ed, and that covers, those things that are locked principals, ELL teachers, special ed costs. $138 million for charters. We had $76 million for unlocked SWD, students with disabilities. $15.7 million was allocated to our alternative option programs in schools, and another $2.4 million in some targeted funding for a total of $780 million. The base per pupil change for this year, you see that the base per pupil for our traditional schools goes from $5,543 per pupil to $5,590 per pupil. And we are recommending that the charter school allocation go from $9,002 per pupil in fiscal year 19 to $9,108 per pupil in fiscal year 20. This next slide, and again, I won't go through this, but this just shows you the allocations in the district office and how the $382 million of centrally allocated costs are broken down. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Grant Skinner if there are any questions to go through the staffing.
I think it's so clear to you guys, but I don't know it's clear to everyone else. You make this bright line distinction between general fund and federal Title I and Title II. It's really hard to get an overall picture of the budget without presenting that information. I thought it would be presented tonight. Maybe I misunderstood, but it's all this, to the schools, it's money that they can spend on important things. And we're being asked to comment on the budget and its impact on schools, yet we can't consider it, with a big important source of funds. So I just ask that we think about doing that. I don't think that's a distinction that needs to be made every year. It's just a suggestion.
Okay, all right.
When we look for the next three slides, we're looking specifically at district office FTEs or positions. This just shows the overall structure of the district office, which mostly looks the same as it did in FY19. I will call out the things that look different. So first, of course, as shared earlier, as came up a couple of times earlier, there's a Chief Communications and Community Engagement Office that shows up as a separate office here, which has communications, family and community engagement, and enrollment choice and transfers. So that looks different from FY19. Then within the legal office, you'll just see fair practices and compliance. That actually doesn't reflect a change to the responsibilities of that office, but just captures together the work of the EEO team, the staff investigations team, and then the minority-owned and women-owned business enterprise team. And then finally, the Chief Executive Office has a call out here that office this year has equity as a focus. We did create the Director of Equity position through the budget process last year. This year, the proposal includes an additional position to support the work of Dr. Durant and the equity work aligned with the policy that you all will be considering. This shows a comparison over the last couple of years by office, by division, in the number of FTEs. So I'll call out the things that are different really from FY19 to FY20. So first, within the executive office, the difference from FY19 to FY20 includes a couple dozen FTEs that shifted from that office into the communications and community engagement office. And then there are a few additional positions in the 21st Century Buildings team, and then a couple others like the equity specialist position. Within academics, you see an increase there. Actually, that the academics team is reduced by 10 positions that are enrollment, choice, and transfer positions that also move in this chart to the communications and community engagement office. Academics also has this addition that Allison referred to of 41 new positions for the intensive learning sites between wholeness specialists and literacy coaches. And then some other smaller reductions of positions within academics. Within the Human Capital Office, there's an increase showing up on this chart of 10 FTEs. That is actually just a shift of where our principal residents are counted. So last year, those were half of those 10 principal resident positions showed up in the school's office, and half of those 10 showed up in individual school budgets. So that's just reflecting them in a different place.
Did you say we were seeing 10 increases?
The human capital line here shows an increase from 66.5 in FY19 to 76.5 this year, or for proposed for next year. And I'm just saying it actually, the full difference there is just reflecting moving the principal residence. And then the school's office, you see essentially the reduction of about that 5 that moved into the human capital office for principal residents. So I think that overall captures the most significant changes that you see reflected in this chart, with an overall increase of 40.5 positions, which is basically the intensive sites. So finally, for district office FTEs, we wanted to show a little more detail to reflect the fact that many positions that are budgeted in the central office are fully deployed or largely deployed to schools or more generally to the field. So there are the left couple of columns for each office show the number of FTEs that are fully deployed, and then those that are mostly, meaning 80% plus, but not fully deployed to schools or the field. So I'll give a couple of examples here. So within the academics row, positions like student wholeness specialists show up in that row or that column for positions that are actually fully deployed. There also are home and hospital teachers within academics that are fully deployed. And then there are some other positions like literacy coaches are counted in the 80% plus because they spend 1 day a week in development activities here in district office. The other example of a row that I'll point out is operations. So you'll see 230 out of about 339 positions in operations show up as fully deployed to the field. These include a range of positions like custodial workers, drivers, bus aides, maintenance workers, and a whole host of other positions from that office.
So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding sources as it relates to the school facility. Some of it will impact the general funds and some are state and local dollars. So the first funding source is through the 21st Century Bond Program, where there are about 26 to 28 schools, brand new schools that will be built through a 4-way partnership with the state, the city, Baltimore City Schools, and the Maryland Stadium Authority. So we have about 9 new and renovated buildings that were open and 5 more to open in FY20. The other funding source is the comprehensive improvement plan. And so that's the funding source that actually funds a lot of our preventative maintenance and all of our repairs in schools. And one of the things that we use in the operations team is the Association of Physical Plant Administration Levels of Standard as our guidepost. Every year since 2014, we have a commitment of an additional $3 million to support the facility maintenance and operations. And that $3 million from 2014 is over a 9-year period of time. And so one of the ways that we strategically apply those resources is to move from where we are right now is at managed care to moving towards a comprehensive stewardship. And a lot of that is based off of staffing and also resources and capacity. So the way that we're doing that with our ongoing support to facilities is continuing our preventative maintenance and inspections. And so a lot of the increase that's going to happen within the budget for that $3 million is going to be between the HVAC contractual work and then also contract maintenance, which includes windows, doors, roofing, a number of those different PMs. There's not going to be a huge increase in our FTE because we are basically, we had an increase in FTE last year, and so we're allocating those resources and staffing up, and then also reducing some of our contractual work so that we can bring in the less skilled work in-house. And then also moving forward with the implementation of our computerized management maintenance system, which is our tracking system that allows us to make strategic decisions about how we staff our team.
Lynette, I just want to, or Dr. Washington, I just want to say, what did you say, Andy? The theme tonight is silence. It's been a long, I mean, I know it's still rough out there, but it's been a long time since we've had somebody come and sit in this seat and scream at us about facilities. Seriously, it's been a while. And I just can't say thank you enough for the great job that you've done, because that's not a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Appreciate those comments. So for the next slide, it's about the capital improvement plan. And so the capital improvement plan does not impact our general funds at all. This is state and local dollars. And so, you know, just as John mentioned about that at the last couple of hours, we received the commitment that is going to come from the state in terms of funding the capital improvement plan. This slide would need to be updated. So at the 90% recommendation, Baltimore City was receiving about $29 million for capital improvement. That includes any new construction projects, the last set of funding for our new construction projects, and then also funding for other systemic projects, our vertical package unit AC projects, and then also window door projects.
How does that compare with last year?
So it's a little bit higher than last year. Because this year they didn't do recycle funding. So we actually got new money this year.
Not much higher.
Yeah, not much higher.
Yeah, and the major renovation, is that still including Holabird and?
So it's the last bit of funding for Holabird.
So we're
and Graceland.
finally in the
Yes.
finish line for seeing dribs and drabs of money going for that project.
We are, and so Holabird and Graceland is already under construction.
Yeah.
They've broken ground, they're moving forward. 2020 is when Holabird and Graceland will come online. So
Yeah.
the other two projects is Marie G. Faring and then also Armistead Gardens.
Great.
So we also get the local contribution that also adds to our CIP, which increases it a little bit higher than the 30 million, which is about 19 million. So there was a additional commitment from the previous years to increase that to 19 million. And again, those dollars are to match our hard construction costs and then any of our other design fees and some of those other fees. So
what's the, I tried everywhere I could look, where does the asterisk, where should that take me? It says 17 million since fiscal year 12, and then there's an asterisk, but I couldn't find a corresponding legend for that.
Yeah, so I think that, so it actually should mean that since FY12, we've been holding steady at a 17 million. It didn't increase until FY19, so we had a recent increase.
I think
slight
in the
increase.
final presentation, you might want to
Fix that.
because at first I actually didn't look at the chart, and because I thought, oh, that's not right. It's 19 million now, but now I see what you did. I don't think you need an asterisk. You need maybe just semicolon up to 19 last year or this year or something.
Yeah, we can correct that. And so during the last legislative session, we received about 15 million for HVAC work. Just as an update, we had 20 projects that were approved, and so they're all either in construction, design, or in some level of process moving forward. They were approved by the IAC. One of the things I wanted to flag is that also last year for the 21st Century School Facilities Act, this was where the IAC was constrained from using contingency funds, and one of the reasons why we got new funding. One of the other highlights was that the CIP would be increased, and as of this morning from the Department of Legislative Services, our CIP actually was decreased by $28 million. The funds were moved to another special funding source for schools that were overcrowded. So that's one of a flag for us, and it's a challenge for us because that fund was not increased. We were made aware that $127 million is in a locked funding under the governor's office for general funds, and so there is some point, a time where the governor can unlock those funds, and it would increase our CIP. And the last two is that we received about $30 million for this year for the Healthy Schools Funds, and that's available for all school systems. And no LEA can receive more than $15 million. So Baltimore City can apply for that fund up to $15 million. And the Healthy School Funds is for windows, plumbing, HVAC, a number of those different things. And then also, again, there was a continuation of the safety school funds. And these were the funds that Dr. Santalisa mentioned before about how we're using about $1 million of it to address CCTVs and some of our interior and exterior locks. Again, we'll receive about that same allocation, and then they'll spread that over to 2024.
So there you have it. Questions? Commissioner McFadden.
So with the capital improvement program, can you talk a little bit more about the net zero buildings?
Oh, you're so excited.
I'm curious to know about that. And the net zero buildings are not through 21st Century.
So they're not. So
And before you answer the rest, because it'll all probably be the same, and Armstead Elementary, Marie E. Faring, those schools are not in the 21st Century program.
So they're not in the 21st Century Bond Program.
Mhm.
They're under the Capital Improvement Program. And so there are, when we receive about $29 million, sometimes we set aside certain funds for major renovation projects, and a lot of times they're targeted towards areas that have significant overcrowding. So Halliburton, Graceland, Armistead Gardens, Marie G. Faring. And so we use those resources. And so Halliburton, Graceland was probably schools that were before the 21st Century Bond Program. And then also, again, the program is only for 26 to 28 schools. We still have other additional schools. So we'll set aside some of the funds within that pot to address new construction projects, and then the rest of the pot is to address systemic projects. So if there is any types of increase in the funding, there may be consideration to accelerate some of those projects. So Halliburton, Graceland Net Zero projects, they received an additional $2 million apiece from the state. Net zero is basically whatever energy that you use, that's also the energy that is created, so it's supposed to be at net zero. My team can talk about it in a lot more detail. So it's solar energy, a number of those different things that are used to create that energy for the schools.
And more efficient, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's a lot of tracking material in order to track the performance of the school. So it's not just about just the equipment and the performance of the equipment, it's also about school behavior too.
I think they've already, if I'm not mistaken, I think they've already dug the geothermal pits at Halliburton. I was just out there the other day. They're tentatively excited. I don't think they quite fully realize what it's going to be like.
Exactly. School behavior changes too.
Yeah.
So we have so generally for capital improvement, we have the PSCP, and then we have the funds that come from the city through the GO bonds.
So both of them are GO. So one is state GO bonds and the other one is the city.
City. Okay. So, and you said since FY12, that locally has been 12.
So locally it has been 17 million, and recently there was a request that we requested to increase, if we can increase it, and the city increased it by another 2 million, so we're at 19 million.
Do we know the comparison of the local contribution for CIP stuff? Do we know that comparison between other LEAs and the amount that those LEAs?
I would say it's, just as comparison, most other LEAs are probably getting 100 million and up, compared to our 19 million, which is a huge challenge from the perspective.
And do we know the reason why? Do we know the reason why? I mean, I think that it's nice to have some sort of increase in that, but in a district with some of the oldest buildings in this region, I would imagine that the local contribution would be prioritized to be a bit more. And so I'm curious to know why that contribution is so small in comparison to the other jurisdictions that neighbor us.
So I would say it's the local tax base too, and that's why we look to the state as the equalizer to help support for Baltimore City. Baltimore City's total CIP, I think, is close to around 60 million. So that in comparison to most other counties who are given about 100, 150, 200 million. So that I think it has a lot to do with the tax base too. That's, in Baltimore City in comparison to Baltimore County, Montgomery County. And I think that's why it was a little bit disappointing for us to see a $28 million cut to the CIP and that funds to be reallocated to schools that were experiencing growth, because most of those schools that are experiencing growth receive significantly more local dollars than Baltimore City.
That's valid, but I also think that, I think that we could prioritize a bit differently at the local level to make sure that our schools are in better condition. Then I also have a question about in the teaching and learning expenditures for FY20 proposed, I see a decrease in the Office of Literacy, Languages, and Culture. And I'm questioning that because we, approved new curriculum, particularly for ELA, and we're doing our best to expand fine arts programming, and I know that they all fall in that office. So I'm curious to know, it's like almost an $800,000 decrease there for FY20.
We can go back and schedule that out for you and give you a more detailed explanation of what the increases and decreases were for where that came out. We can do that for you for the.
I would like that, yeah.
We can take care of it.
Thank you. That's teaching and learning. This is in the academics office. Yeah, I'm looking at I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the slides.
Hassan?
No, I think I'm done.
Commissioner Hassan?
So a clarifying question to build off what Commissioner McFadden was asking. So the city's CIP allocation to us is around 19 million. Our bond service payment to the city is about 10 million, correct?
They're two different things.
Yes, I know I'm mixing my metaphors, but if we just talk about like, my husband's gonna spend $15 and I'm gonna spend $20, it's still coming the 35 out of our household ability to function. So if we were to mix those metaphors and think about that, then really it's only 9 million we're coming out over to put towards, yes, they're targeted to different buckets, and I get that, but just in the overall, when we talk about city contribution, money in, money out, am I?
The city contribution, that's two things. The 19 million that we've received is the result of the city selling general obligation bonds and giving us the proceeds. The $10 million that you're talking about, I think, I'm assuming that the 21st century, that is debt service payments to pay debt on bonds that have already been borrowed at a much greater rate, more like 700 or 800 million.
But if we didn't have that payback to the city, then?
But the payback is not for the city, it's on the city's behalf, is how it actually happens, and it's because the city gave us some more money, which increased and allowed our state revenue to go up to kind of offset a portion of that, and that's the way the agreement was. But, yeah, you're right. If we had an additional $10 million, we could leverage that.
Yeah, I just feel like it sounds like we're getting more leverageable income than we are. Yeah. So then my other question, and this one might be what Commissioner Frank was trying to ask earlier, but if you look in the budget book, at pages, 50, 51 for general fund revenue, so the title funds are not listed there. And then if you look at that sort of in comparison to page 15, with ESOL learners, it looks like the ESOL is coming from the general fund, but the general fund doesn't include title dollars. So how are we making sure that the title dollars are being directed to the areas where they're supposed to be allocated, and how do we see that in here?
As part of the school allocations, we'll try to put something together that's a little bit more comprehensive for you for the next time. But the way that in governmental fund, the general fund is the money that we get from the state and the city through our general fund. And that's what we're able to allocate and we have flexibility for. When you get into the things that we get from the federal government, Title I, Title II, any of the federal grants, they're restricted, and they're restricted to certain ways of spending money, and that's why we put them in the other fund. But we can.
Right.
Not the state money that we receive in the general fund.
Correct. So my question then, should we assume that any title dollars are then truly supplementing rather than supplanting services and teachers and professional development, especially Title IV, around Title?
I can't show you a slide, but yes, they do. When we run comparability reports, we're required each year to run comparability reports to make sure that we are supplementing and not supplanting. So that's part of our process that we go through when the budget is completed to make sure that, and then there have been some cases where we've had to do some additional allocations to a few small schools to make sure that we weren't doing that, but we go through that process.
Yeah, and I don't know how you'd format it so we could see that.
I'm not sure either, but we'll figure something
But
out.
even if it was like the old anatomy book where you could overlay, now this is where this is going to go.
Yeah, well, I'll contradict myself a little bit in that you can see with the Title I dollars flowing to each school. So in this budget book, you have the Title I allocation by school. And I completely forgot what I was going to say. I did this yesterday, too.
While he's thinking, Commissioner Kashani.
Wait a minute.
Chief, Teresa, you mentioned, and this might go back to what you were saying, but we also in the general fund see a decrease in the federal revenue. So were you speaking about that earlier with the Title I?
No, that's something completely different. The federal revenue that we receive as part of our general fund is E-rate reimbursement revenue.
Okay. Okay, I get that. Thank you.
I did remember. Thank you, I'm good. Thank you for that. Could you tell us, the bridge to Kerwin, what we called it, had city and state and district, I guess. How much did the city increase its contribution above its maintenance of effort over the 3 years?
They were required to increase their maintenance of effort by $10 million over the fiscal year 2017 contribution in each of the 3 years. So it was $10 million higher in 18, $10 million in 19, and $10 million in.
So this year would be 30 million, or
No,
it's not cumulative?
It was just 10 million each year. Yeah, so their revenue's been flat at 278 million in maintenance of effort. Now, what the city has done is the city has increased the level of services that they provided to us over the 3 years to supplement. The way the project worked over the 3-year period is it was supposed to be $60 million a year over 3 years.
Right.
And the way the projections went back in the bidding is the state revenue was going to slightly decline as the 3 years went on because of the way the laws were written. And the city revenue, or the city would contribute more over that 3-year period to make sure that we got the 60 million. So the city gave us like $12 million worth of services in the first year, and I think it went up to 22 the next year.
So a question for this board and for all of us is, what is the city going to do after the bridge to Kerwin? And, well, we will want to know.
That's for us to ask to them.
Right.
Yes.
And it will depend on, I imagine, what is allocated next year, minus the things that are categorical that we have to spend in certain locations, how much becomes unencumbered or flexible. And then there will likely be a gap next year from the 60 million that we've received and in services and in cash. I'm not getting a sense that that will be made up entirely by next year's state funding, or do we not know that?
We don't know that at this point, but you're right. You're right. The Bridge to Kerwin funding sunsets in fiscal year 20.
It's a cliff, it's not a sunset.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, it's done. And the Kerwin funding, we are anticipating that the additional dollars that we get from Kerwin will make up for the state portion. The city portion, we still need to think about.
Commissioner Lynn?
So my first question, I promise I have multiple. So Alexander Hamilton, I'm on page 27 here on the budget book. Alexander Hamilton's population is the same, but their general funding as well as their Title I funding is decreasing. Maybe is the Title I funding the result of us switching from finding the rate of the poverty level, but why is the general funding decreasing as well?
Why is the general fund being decreased? Okay, we'll check on that and we'll get an answer for you.
Okay. And for Poly, Poly is increasing one student and they're losing about $93,000 as well. And Callaway is losing 4 and is losing 12, but Booker T is losing $45,000 from their
Some of
budget.
it has to do with the way the formula is written, and the formula is written in such a way that we provide two things to schools. We provide what we call baseline funding, which means we gave a minimum amount of funding to small schools so that they could exist. And I don't know this without checking it, but I would think that Alexander Hamilton at 160 students would probably have gotten some sort of baseline funding that would have, and that decreases over time. So that would be one portion. And then the other thing in some of the high schools is we did another thing over the past 2 years when we put in the new funding formula is we put in what we call a hold harmless. And we put in a hold harmless so that schools would not suffer necessarily from moving from the old funding formula to the new funding formula. And we would kind of put that in over time. And in some cases, we may have given as 100% of hold harmless in fiscal year 19. We only gave it like 80 or 70% in fiscal year 20. So part of it could be that. But we'll look at them and we'll try to get some back.
Okay.
And I would just take this opportunity just to, again, to remind the board that a number of the school-based allocations still, to what John just said, actually have a hold harmless provision that, again, at some point when the board revisits the current school funding formula, we're going to have some reckoning discussion about how long we can do that, will we do that, if the overall funding formula doesn't change, because the assumption, it was based upon the fact that we would expect some kind of increase in funding. So that day of reckoning is going to be coming shortly, that we have to review that.
And really quickly, the enrollment number that you see there is the total school enrollment. When it comes to Title I, it's based on the number of directly certified students. So right now, like, you wouldn't be able to see in the budget book how that particular calculation has been determined for the schools, but the schools did receive letters when we put forward the projected funding amounts that breaks that down for them, because it's a function of not only their count of students, but also based on their poverty rate, what their actual per pupil amount would be. Because if you recall, a couple of years ago, we went to a tiered model so that we were concentrating more funds for the higher poverty schools. So not every school is receiving the same per pupil amount depending on their students. Yes.
My next question is that on page 68, within the college and career writing expenditures by object and category, I don't seem to see where ASCBC is, and I just wanted to know if they are supposed to be there, because within the board office expenditure summary, PCAB is explicitly stated. Why is not ASCBC stated within the college career readiness or even the board office expenditures?
I don't know. I think we'll have to look into it. I mean, it could be they're under contractual. I don't know.
It's contractual.
Oh, it is?
She's shaking her head back and saying it's
Oh, it's
contractual.
contractual.
It's
Okay,
under
thank
contractual.
you.
Why? Okay. And if it's under contractual, can we be like, I mean, not like PCAB, but like, can we be like stated at least about the expenses and explicitly stated so I can see how much we're gonna be getting that year, or in some type of way, I want to see what actual ASCBC, not all of the contractual services get. Is that possible?
We look into it.
Okay. And for the along with ASCBC, the I can't find. Oh, okay. I know what it is. Okay, for the student transportation services, this is for college and career readiness. Is ASCBC implemented into that or no? Oh, never mind. These are permanent.
Pfeiffer, did you wanna, you're waving your hand, or were you just stretching? Please, why don't you come on up?
Hey there, Rachel Pfeiffer, Executive Director, College and Career Readiness. Great questions. So ASCBC is broken out separately, and it is under contractual, and we can get that exact number to you. In terms of student transportation, there's not a special set aside for ASCBC there, so that ASCBC would be among one of the groups who would be eligible for accessing those funds. We tend to use them for students to pursue work-based learning or other opportunities that they would need to get to on a regular basis or maybe for one-time events. And if schools don't have enough money and it's something that is important for their learning.
So, is there a way that we can, since we are eligible to, receive the funding for that particular thing, but is it a way for us to kind of see? Because I mean, within the 3 years that I've been in ASCBC, we've been continuously on the same round of how much we spend on transportation and everything. So can we kind of get that pulled out and kind of later on in history document that situation? Because I just want to know the same, because I just want to know, in the budget.
We can have a conversation about it. That money is the money we have for transportation for all the students that have all kinds of transportation needs that come out throughout the year. So we can just talk through what ASCBC might need and whether there are other funding resources that we could help you access as well.
So is what you're saying, Dr. Pfeiffer, is that there is not a budgeted allocated transportation amount for
No,
for the group?
the amount that is budgeted for ASCBC is the amount for all the various things that that ASCBC might need to spend money on, including transportation and including registration for conferences and things like that. We recognize that there's more money that would be ideal for you to have. And so if there's something, so we can have kind of continued conversations about how you might be able to get that. But right now in our budget, what's there specifically designated for ASCBC is in that contractual section.
Okay. And my last question is that for the schools that don't receive Title I funding, like City College and BSA and all them, why is Poly, if they're proposed losing one student, why are they losing almost, and you probably explained it already, but why are they losing like almost $100,000?
We'll go back, like I said, we'll go back and look into it for you, but I think in the case of some of the larger high schools, it has to do with the fact that we've reduced the amount of the hold harmless from fiscal year
Meaning we
19
were
to fiscal year
floating
20.
them, right? So the current formula gives more to help sustain, that's why I call it a float, right? Large comprehensive high schools, because we knew that under the current formula, they would take a hit as we became more equitable in the allocations for high poverty schools that were at the elementary and middle level, correct, John?
That's correct.
And so, like, everybody, and I just want to kind of put this out there because folks, like, some of the reconciliations we're going to have to do in our definitions of equity, and what I like to say is everybody likes equity until their school gets less, right? And equity, when you don't have an increasing pot of money, equity is redistribution. So what happens is people come up and they testify, we need it to be equitable, we need equity, we need equity. Well, what happened in the current formula was we actually shifted with the formula. The formula shifted and was designed to give schools with higher concentrations of poverty relative to their schools, right? Which is why it was a great question, Commissioner Lynn, right? But I'm taking this moment because then what happens is we have people come and testify that their schools got less, and everybody assumes when you say equity, it means your school's going to get more. That is not what equity means. Equity means if the pie does not get larger, then based on the criteria by which resources are allocated, you may get less. And so what happened with the large comprehensives was if we had gone purely by what the formula was designed to do, those schools would have lost significant money. And we made the determination and we said to the board, so it's just a little reminder, this is not new information. We said to the board, we are deliberately allocating beyond what the formula would give those schools because we didn't want to have a cliff effect and impact. But I can't restate enough, right? Equity does not mean you keep the same pie and everybody gets more. It means it is comparative to the other schools. And so part of the rub that we are going to have to grapple with is how much equity do we want? Because we have comparative poverty. Everybody likes to blanket say every school in the city has the same level of poverty. And I'm not saying all kids don't deserve more, but like I said, it's a convenient word. But for those of us who actually have to do the computation and actually have to look at where it shifts, it means something very different. And that's why I keep this refrain of everybody likes equity until they don't. Until it means that their school does not qualify, then suddenly people want to come up and testify and say it's not equitable. When you have a small pie, it means somebody is going to get less. So I just want to put that out there because everybody and their brother talks about equity. And then we come up here and people complain when it means some people get less. That's what that means. So that was my little editorial comment.
Other comments, questions on the budget? Commissioner Hassan?
So, a question by the individual chiefs by office on the budget breakdown distributions. Should we, as we move forward, anticipate seeing any procurement items that are, say, proposed by human capital would come out of the contractual services or materials line item budget number that we see here? Or does that money come from somewhere else? Comes from
No,
here?
It will come from,
So, and I used human capital as an example just because it's here, because I can also remember that we typically have an $800,000 procurement annually, or roughly that, for TFA. And if that comes out of your $140,000 or your $98,000, that's going to be pretty under budget. And even your $1 million for materials or contractual services, that gives you very, very little wiggle room. And I just want to point that out, that you have very, very little wiggle room. But also, to suggest possibly as procurement items come up through the year, if this little slide could come with them so we could see, so how much is going to be left in the budget after we procure this item? You know, I know we've asked similar questions, but this seems like a way we could format that as part of that procurement process so we can keep a better handle on, you know, when people come back for supplementary funding or things like that and know where it's coming from, just be better informed on the budget.
I would think that would be very helpful, just because it is hard to, as we go through the year, to remember kind of where we are. And it doesn't mean that budget adjustments can't be made and items move between line items, because the budget's just a plan.
Yeah. That does happen over the course of the year, but we could probably figure out a way to do
And
so.
we're glad that it can happen, and we need to be nimble enough to allow it to happen. I'm just thinking, as I've sat on the board for a few years now, and getting a handle on procurement and making sure that we're not just playing sort of whack-a-mole with money, but being really intentional, especially because in some offices like Chief Grant Skinner's, it's a very small, flexible budget after that for materials and contracts.
I would say it could be a challenge in some, we have to think about how to do it, because for some offices, and Chief Washington just pointed out, that a lot of their money is capital money, so it's not all the same. So this refers to general funds. And so for a lot of academics expenses, it's title dollars for some of the human capital expenses as well. So that's part of the challenge.
It is, but it would also help us keep a better handle on title dollars and a better understanding and awareness of board members on where they're going.
Okay, so I guess we'll be back on the 23rd to see it again.
We'll be back on the 23rd, and there's also a board budget forum.
On the 11th.
Thursday at
Thursday.
6 p.m. here.
Yeah, we'll be here.
And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. One final presentation for the school, item 18.03, school renaming requests from Gilmore/Pinderhughes and Afia/Brems Lane.
Good evening, School Commissioners. Angela Alvarez, the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
And I'm Lindsay Anderson. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives.
So we're just presenting for information for the public and for you two school communities that are seeking to go through a renaming process and get a vote from you at a later meeting. So we have been doing work over the last year and a half with the Penderhughes and Gilmore community. As part of that work, we did a lot of engagement around what would go into the new program, and naming is one of those natural things that has come up. And so we're continuing to work with them. The school community is really interested in having a new name to designate coming together when they merge this fall in 2019. And so it's important to having a new identity and really seeing themselves as one school community as opposed to two separate communities.
So the school leadership has gone through the process outlined in the school renaming policy. They have submitted a request to the district office and formed a renaming committee that consists of staff, students, parents, and community members. We've done some initial surveying of community members and parents and students in summer 2018, and we'll do some more surveying this spring, along with some community forums and opportunities to speak with students and parents and staff. Last year, the surveys that we conducted in summer 2018 had an opportunity for community members to suggest names. The Sandtown Community School got the most suggestions. So after that were suggestions related to combining the name Gilmore and Pinderhughes. A lot of people also indicated to just let the students decide. So Sandtown Community School will appear on surveys this spring, along with opportunities to suggest additional names.
From anybody,
No, don't, that's okay. There wasn't one to bring up. I was just.
yeah, no, I was just, when you mentioned it, I was just curious, does anybody mind losing the name Pinderhughes? Are there any historical, because there are some schools that, some historical figures we really can't lose. I mean, the closing, when we close MLK, that, I don't know, I'm not saying the surveys are the surveys, but I just wondered, has that come up out there?
And Commissioner Kashani, to your point, there are schools that we have closed in the past, and I thought that there were some, like the names that we perhaps recycle for new schools. So were those names considered in this process also?
So I guess two things. One, we're still early, so the names, we did do like a survey last summer where that name has come forward. That's a name that people seem to favor. However, we're just really beginning, like, looking at all the possibilities. And so that's unfolding over the next few weeks and with online and forums to get input from the broader community. We haven't heard anything about wanting to maintain the Pender Hughes name to date.
I was just curious.
So.
When you mentioned it, it just made me wonder,
Yeah.
because it's come up in other settings.
And I mentioned it probably because I was one of the people who was around when that name was the one that was being voted on for the new school, William Pender Hughes. Right.
I mean, one of the things that we'll continue to work through with the community is how we honor the legacy of each of the individual schools within the new school. So that's something that's at the top of our mind. So that's another way to do that too.
I'm not really surprised that Sandtown Community School was the top, because out of that community, and as Commissioner, you might want to add to this, some very strong, powerful people historically came out of there. Tyson Tilden came out of there, Charles Tilden came out of there, and Pender Hughes, and Thurgood Marshall was.
Thurgood Marshall.
Parent Mitchell, Thurgood Marshall. I could just go down the whole list. It's a powerful group of nationally known people came out of Sandtown. So even though Pender Hughes is big, yeah, I knew her well. But I'm just saying that when you go and do a piece on it and you make a decision, those family members of those people are some of them, most of them are still living. And I think that I'm surprised that they weren't even if they were at the planning committee. But,
Yeah. So I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So I just want to emphasize, like, we may come back to you with another name. We're still really early in the process. So it could be that a contingent that really wants to keep Pender Hughes comes forward. It could be a name that we're not thinking of is what gets the most votes. We're still early on, so I wouldn't crystallize around, oh, it's going to be this name yet. It's still early.
Well, you have a lot of new young people now voting, but there's a history in that community. And I'd really like to see it be Sandtown, but that's just me.
What it's worth, column. I don't know if this is the same guy. Harry Ward Gilmore was the Baltimore City Police Commissioner like the 1800s, and he was also the head of the Baltimore City Police Department in the 1870s, but he was also noted as a daring and dashing Confederate cavalry officer. We can lose.
Not
Just
surprising given Baltimore City's.
Yeah,
role
there might
in
have been
that.
another Gilmore, but this is the one that comes up when you
Yeah.
Google it for Baltimore history. Anyway, whatever.
Interesting.
There's a lot of them.
So the next thing I want to talk to you about is Afia and Brums Lane Elementary School. So this board voted to, the school requested, and this board voted to approve merging those two schools last year into one K-8 school. So they also wanted to make sure that they had a unifying name for the school community. They will be slowly phasing out the middle school program, so the Brems Lane will have sixth grade next year, where Afia still just have seventh and eighth, so it's a slow phase out. But they wanted to make sure they had a single identity while they're across two campuses. And so the name that they're proposing is the Beller Edison School, and they've done some work around that part of the process.
So they have also followed the steps outlined.
We have a question. Keep going, sorry.
Okay. In the policy, they have submitted a request to the district office and formed a renaming committee. They have had several community meetings, meetings with staff at both schools, meetings with students and parents. They've spoken with a total of between 250 and 300 people about the renaming. And in addition to the community meetings they've had, they've also done a survey. So over the 60 formal surveys, they received 80% either agreed or strongly agreed with the new name.
I'm back. Yeah, I know what I'm going to say. I'm trying to say it the right way. There is a not totally successful, pleasant memory of some schools, of a relationship that we had with some schools that ended up with the almost the same name as the one that you are proposing. And while I understand the name is the name of the community, when I first looked at it, I wondered why they didn't put community in there. Because there,
There's not very many people that remember the Edison.
yeah, we didn't have,
Yeah.
the Edison School
Okay.
experience was not a real great one for us. And those schools had, that was the way those schools were named, Montebello Edison. So while I understand Bel Air Edison is the name of the community, I really would think, Bel Air Edison Community School is, unless we're really sure that people understand it's not going to be an Edison school,
I think
because they are still around.
I think that's a good flag. We'll share that with the operator to bring back to their school community. We have time, as you're not voting on this tonight. So, no, that was a good flag. It didn't even click in my head until you were saying it.
Commissioner Hassan?
Does Avia Brems, that covers two buildings?
Yes.
And so are they going to call it the upper or the lower? Are they going to be the same building?
Yeah, I think they're in their plan, and Lindsay can correct me if I get this wrong because she's the one that did all the hard work on this. But in their plan, they're still going to refer to where Avia is located as the Avia campus and the Brems campus to have the name, some of that naming still there.
Yeah, they're going to refer to the Avia campus as the Brandon campus, because that's what street it's on. So Brandon and Brems campuses.
I'm just trying to mitigate the confusion.
I don't know. I don't know the origins of Brems.
I did confirm, it's the same guy. It's like, okay. Okay, thank you, ladies. With that, I'll just note the upcoming meetings. As was noted earlier, we have a board forum on the budget on Thursday night here at 6. We'll all be back together again upstairs at 3 on the 23rd for executive session, and the public board meeting at 5 o'clock on the 23rd. PCAB's next meeting is on the 25th at 6:30 in this room. Teaching and Learning will meet on May 7th at 3:30 in this room. The Operations Committee will meet on May 21st at 10 o'clock in this room. And the Policy Committee will meet at 3:30 on May 21st in this room. Anything else for the good of the whole? With that, may I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Bondima, second by Commissioner Lynn. All in favor? Everybody's in favor of this. There's 8 of us left, so 8 for, no opposed, and 2 absent. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.